100% legal, 0% normal. What psychopath behaviors will freak people out? Going to Starbucks and ordering a milk with ice. Wearing the skin of a roast chicken like a mask. Asking an old person to give up their seat on the bus. Using both hands to put on chapstick? That's a fabulous mental image. Stop responding midway through a real-life conversation, but maintain eye contact. Oh, sorry, I was lagging. Paint yourself orange, dye your hair green, and then stand in a hole and pretend you're a carrot. Pulling your pants and underwear all the way down to pee at a men's urinal. I knew a kid in elementary school who did this. Normally, he'd use the stalls, but one time he did it at the urinal and yelled, "Oops, I'm not in the stall," and then turned and made and held eye contact when I looked because he yelled. "How long do you take to pee?" "Oh, the peeing is fast, Oscar. It's getting my tie back on." Wearing a wedding gown to somebody else's wedding. Eating in public without using your hands at all. Wait, you mean just like face first? Eating a banana with the skin on. Cue the angry Sea of Thieves sounds. How about working out in a suit? I had a classmate who did phys ed as well as everything else in a suit. He only had suits, about 20 times the very same outfit, including shoes and ties. Offering candies to kids in a van with homemade logos. I drive an unlettered black van that's in rough shape. I can never stop at a lemonade stand, and it makes me sad. Standing next to somebody at a urinal even when there's a spot open at the opposite end of the row. Like, "Oh wow, you only use one hand to hold it. I use both. Wild. Well, see you tomorrow." Instead of holding the door open, especially at a restaurant with dual double doors, you close them right after you enter or exit the building. The place where I work had an incident recently where someone came into the building, found an unlocked office and stole some stuff. So they sent out an email saying, "Don't let people follow you in." Pretty standard advice that everyone ignores. This isn't a secure complex of any kind. You need a swipe card to open the outer doors, but there's no security. I was coming back from lunch and a lady in front of me swiped in, opened the door, and then firmly closed it behind her. You know what? I'm going to say that as rude as that is, I'll now consider this a valid thing. And if someone explains to me why they were locking me out, I feel like there isn't much you can reasonably do to protest. It doesn't mean that it won't happen to a high-level exec, who'll then get someone fired just for following protocol. Trimming your lawn with scissors. Like, calm down, Bob, I haven't even mown mine in 3 months. My boss used to apply lip balm while making firm eye contact with me at the end of the day. Wait, isn't the real question, why did you make eye contact with him every day at this time? Eating unwrapped food from inside your pockets. I was on a road trip with my cousin, and probably 30 minutes after we were on the road, he pulls out a perfect slice of pepperoni pizza from his pocket. It looked like it was out of a commercial. One of the politicians in our country bit into a hot dog sideways and in the middle, like a sandwich. I was serving a very green Chinese businessman at the pub, and he ordered a burger, and after a few seconds of sizing it up, he stabbed it in the center with his fork and started eating it like a candy apple. I asked him if he was okay, and he shrugged and said, "Sorry, I haven't figured out how to eat these yet." Standing silently along a forest road. I once did that in the moonlight while taking out the trash. I turned off my light and just enjoyed the serene night. Then I heard rustling in the bush, and my LED light just frickin' died. It hasn't worked since, but yeah, nice. Writing an S from the bottom up. You know, I've seen some pretty messed up stuff in these answers, but this one genuinely made me stop. Casually eating a stick of butter during a business meeting. Eating a stick of butter anywhere looks like a psychopath to me. Putting your shoes on before the pants. Skinny jeans wearers are in shambles, I tell ya. When you just happen to be going to the same place as the car or pedestrian in front of you. It's even creepier when it's long distance and they look behind them and see you. There was one time we were driving to a friend's home and a cyclist in front of us kept taking the same turns as we wanted to take. They then rode into the driveway of our friend's house, so we pulled into the driveway as well and asked him if he knew that person. He had no idea who it was. Turns out the cyclist thought we were following them and decided to pretend that it was their house so we'd go away. I felt bad for the poor cyclist. They must have been terrified. Brushing your teeth in public. My husband had a weird, eccentric uncle that we didn't know well, and he was some hotshot rich dentist. We were following behind him on the way to a family wedding reception from the church, and we saw him doing something weird in his rearview mirror. then watched him open his car door and spit out a bunch of white fluid like an android from Alien. His kids say he just randomly starts brushing his teeth everywhere, like the mall or a pool, and spits into trash cans. A couple of years later, he was arrested for possession of white snow, as well as his mistreatment of his family and major fraud and tax evasion. He regularly offered the kids substances, and they sometimes did them as a family. His daughter got out and went to North Carolina. His son is still buddy-buddy with dad, though. So yeah, anecdotally, psychos brush their teeth in public. Vacuuming your yard. Great chemical-free way to keep dandelions from spreading. Wait, is this an actual thing that people do? While shopping, pulling what you want out of other people's carts before they buy them. I did this by accident because I mistook it for a cart an employee was using to put stuff on the shelf. I saw a whole cart of socks and I needed them, but they didn't have the type I needed on the shelf, because an old man was apparently buying them all. Sending orange juice and coffee to random people in a restaurant at dinner, and when they look over, you give them a little salute and a knowing smile. Using your knife and fork to slice each French fry into small, dainty pieces. Walking around in public with a glass of water from home. People will be asking, "Hey, what's with the water?" "I bought it from home, so legally it's mine and you can't have any." A manager I once had been reading a How to Manage People book, which ended up with him telling me I was doing a good job, shaking my hand normally and then just standing still for 30 seconds, still holding my hand in complete silence, staring directly into my eyes. Was supposed to be a reassuring show of dominance or some such thing, but it was just weird and creepy. So how's the paper sales industry treating you? Entering an elevator full of people and not turning to face the door, and then exit by walking backwards, right? Tooting and deeply inhaling it in public. Deeply inhaling other people's toots in public is worse, though. Eating people meat. It's not illegal in 49 states, but you can't kill a person or desecrate a corpse. But you can buy human parts under research, and as long as you're not buying organs for transplant, which is highly illegal, you can serve it to others and even do it in front of the cops. Not that I'd recommend that, but legally you can. It's apparently really tasty, as one guy apparently cut off his foot and turned it into tacos. Upon further review of the rules and other answers, I think this one wins. Going out to the gym or something and using a Hershey's syrup bottle as a water bottle. A friend did that with a bright yellow mustard bottle while running 10Ks for charity. People were so concerned they asked a cop to talk to him. Dressing like a penguin and walking on 4 legs. Wearing your underwear over your pants. Wearing a wedding gown everywhere. And I mean everywhere. I had a classmate who'd wear hers to really hard exams. She said she loved the way she looked in it and it made her feel great about herself, so she'd wear it as a motivational boost. It was a little weird, but really fun. Doing yard work at night. I mean, that's serial killer activity, right? My ride-on mower has headlights on it and it honestly creeps me out to think of someone mowing at night. Staring at people in public. It's not illegal, but you could still find yourself to be in trouble. Not making any attempts to dry your hands after washing them. Imagine shaking hands and the other person's hand is just dripping wet. I lived in China for several years. The men clear their throats really loudly and spit, like all the time, everywhere. Even in decent sit-down restaurants, the men will spit on the floor. It's so normal, the waitstaff are in the habit of putting newspapers down on the floor for groups of men who are there to eat, drink, socialize, and, yes, spit. I can put up with a lot, but that's one thing that got me every time. I know it's not my culture, I just found it frickin' vile. Putting vinegar on mac and cheese. I need to know why anyone thought that was a good idea. Carrying around a blow-up doll that you claim to be married to. My dog attacked a bird and I fell to my knees Braveheart style, screaming, "No!" I looked up and my neighbor was standing outside drinking his coffee watching the whole thing. I said, "He ate a bird." The neighbor said nothing, sipped his coffee and eventually walked back into his house. I was unraveled by the whole situation, but when I went inside, the first thing I said was, "Well, that neighbor's a frickin' psychopath." Taking the escalator facing the opposite way, and I mean as an adult. Believe me, I used to run up and down escalators all the time or just walk on the end like a treadmill when no one was watching as a kid, and I thought I was really cool. I'm going to one-up you there and bring up something I've seen, admittedly only in the homes of very old British people: fully carpeted bathrooms. I mean, that's already a danger that surely only becomes more pressing as your control of your bodily functions waxes and wanes with age. Sitting on a park bench, opening a jar of mayonnaise and furiously eating the contents with just your bare hands. Excuse me, furiously? What other way is there to eat mayonnaise with your bare hands? How about sensually? Screaming in public at nothing except the existential dread you're feeling. So yeah, maybe pre-2020. Post-2020, if I see someone screaming in public, I calmly walk over to them and I scream too. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Blasting Highway to Hell during a funeral. My dad had this as a ringtone since it's one of his favorite songs. He works for a small family business, so he and the other employees were invited to his boss's mother's funeral. Accidentally forgot to set his phone on silent and he got a call. So the song starts blasting during the service. Thankfully, everyone thought this was funny. Licking doorknobs. Bringing food to a restaurant. It's not illegal, but the restaurant can and most likely will kick you out. Not leaving a one-booth space in a public urinal. A few years ago, my next-door neighbor was very fond of an after-work, late-afternoon gin and tonic. One afternoon, he poured himself a good slug of gin and realized he had no tonic. So the neighborhood was treated to the sight of him clutching his glass of gin, going from door to door asking for tonic water. You know, I wouldn't want to live in the kind of neighborhood where I'd be looked down upon for borrowing a splash of tonic from a neighbor. In Florida, of course, it's completely legal to walk around carrying a fully kitted-out automatic firearm as long as you're also carrying a fishing pole. As someone from Australia, you frickin' what, mate? Tinfoil hats, unless you're also wearing a monocle, at which point it somehow crosses over to making you seem really interesting. Framing photos of yourself. Honestly, after years of hating myself, I think I deserve a little vanity. I let my husband pick which family photos he wanted to have printed and framed. I was expecting my dad, who'd passed away, our son, a family picture of the two of us. Nope, it was all me. That man had 25 pictures of me blown up and professionally framed and hung them up all over our house. And he will not let me take them down because he says they're all so beautiful. It's deeply embarrassing. Asking for water at a restaurant in a bowl on the floor and then lapping it up. I'd like a single plum, floating in perfume, served in a man's hat. Calling yourself Lord Lady Slayer on Reddit. Being a Scientologist. P.S. I am not a Scientologist. Eating ketchup with a spoon. Biting into the Kit Kat without breaking it in half. To clarify, I do this and I get weird looks. How about breaking the Kit Kat perpendicular to the grooves? Unbuckling your belt in public. Drinking blue Kool-Aid out through a thoroughly cleaned-out Windex bottle in public. I don't know, it seems to keep me from streaking, so I think the public is appreciative. Laughing. You can laugh wherever you like and not much can be done about it, except in Gotham. I once parked in a car park, opened my car boot to get a tape measure out. I was at a hardware store for carpet runners. It was Sunday and I was ripping up carpets at home, sanding back the floorboards and staining them, when I found myself being yelled at by a lady who thought I'd taken her spot. She suddenly stopped, her eyes went very wide and she backed away before marching quickly back to her car. I was a bit surprised by all of this. I looked into my open car boot, that's the trunk for you Americans, across the plastic sheeting that I was taking to the tip, a box of face masks, loose zip ties. My day job involved network cabling, Stanley knives and various tools. The best part was I'd been staining the floorboards and the plastic sheeting was covered in blotches of red stain. That poor woman must have thought I was some kind of serial killer. Wearing Halloween costumes as your everyday wear. Mowing your yard at night. I mean, he had his headlights on and that's what they're there for, right? It's been 20 years and the neighbors still talk about that guy. Mixing water and peanut butter to make it drinkable. You sick son of a bee. Microwaving your ice cream. It's not my fault your freezer is set to absolute zero, Mum. Either get a fridge that works or get off my butt. using a pumice stone on your feet until you have a little pile of footskin dust, then putting it in a small jar and displaying it in your living room trinket shrine and calling it your foot soot. Walking around barefoot in the winter. Going for a walk at 3 a.m., trying to explain to the police that you're just out enjoying a walk at night and watching them scratch their heads trying to figure out what crime you committed or are about to commit. A while ago, my neighbor was shaving his head on his front lawn with some clippers and multiple extension cords. He's a weird guy. I don't care if it was outside, it's just that he has a sizable, fully fenced rear yard, but did this in the front yard almost on the nature strip and needed more than one extension cord to get that close to the road. Running in non-workout clothing. Eating food in any bathroom ever. My awful, controlling mother searched my ex's, as well as my husband's public records, to see what properties they own, divorce records, and stuff like that. Her reasoning was, "It's legal." Not too long after doing that, in each case, she asked for money. When I said I can't give cash, but I'm willing to pay her phone bill online, she freaked out. "He's wealthy. You won't even take out cash for me. It's only $200. Last year, she brought up looking at mother-in-law apartment plans. She said it as a matter of fact that we should get to building it because you have land and you can afford to. You psycho. My husband said, "Oh, don't worry, we'll get her into the very best nursing home her money can buy." In short, digging through public records of your kids' partners because it's legal, and then using that info in arguments. You should buy a burial plot and show her the paperwork. Say, "Don't worry, we've got a place picked out just for you." Wiping before you go number 2. What's the point of this? Warm up the old race car track? Cutting your grass with a scythe. Virgin lawnmower fan versus Chad scythe enjoyer. Eating condiments as a meal by themselves. 1 cup of your finest ranch, please. Going through grocery store checkout with an hour's worth of coupons for your cashier to process. Just staring into the front of businesses but never going inside or moving. I mean, that would be loitering. It's actually illegal in many places. Picking your nose in public. Tooting everywhere, all the time in front of everybody, and then asking said person how it smells. A friend of mine is famous for crop dusting. 1 minute he's beside you, then gone. And then the smell hits, and everyone looks at you. I will say that it's hard to avoid committing that second unwitting crime if you just have constant unavoidable gas at all times. But yes, asking someone how it smells is both legal and absolutely abhorrent. Criteria for this video met. Laughing when someone dies. Oh God! I've only ever been invited to 2 funerals, but this was my great-grandfather's, and teenage me spent the entire thing in hysterics. Like I was downright howling the entire time. Like it was the funniest thing in the world, to the point I very quickly excused myself. Yeah, turns out that rather than crying when something's overwhelmingly sad or stressful, I start hysterically laughing. It's not a good look. I've never been invited, nor will I ever go to another serious funeral again. Which brings me to the other funeral. This other was my childhood best friend's dad's funeral, but it was meant to be a funny occasion. In his will, he demanded that all the men wear dresses to it. It's somewhat more acceptable to laugh when the father of the departed has just flashed the entire assembled audience with his red G-string. That was a weird funeral. Laying off 30% of the workforce, but then giving yourself a multi-million-dollar bonus. Having the head of your bed separated from the wall in the middle of the bedroom. Nope, this gives one more direction the monster can grab you from. Buying toy dolls and pretending that they're your real babies. Speakerphone conversation on the bus. A lot of the things I do as an autistic person, like putting beach pebbles in my mouth, making sudden weird sounds, saying baps loudly in a supermarket, collecting things I find on the ground, rubbing stuff like trees and railings. I'm a 30-year-old with a first-class honors degree, and I also like to suck little rocks at the beach. This comment section is my new bucket list. I was asked to make a cold cappuccino once, poured espresso shots into a full cup of ice, filled it with more ice, then steamed milk until the whole thing was foam, and put it on top of the ice. Perfectly legal, and the girl loved it, but I definitely felt like a psychopath doing it. That's a Freddo cappuccino. Good stuff. Change every single screen you can inside of a Best Buy or other store with a lot of interconnected devices to a picture of Gary Busey's face. I'm not actually sure it's legal, but I did it like 12 times and nothing happened but pure joy. Singing out at the top of my lungs to the lyrics of my music I'm listening to as I ride my bike and escaping my depression and loneliness. Hissing at people on the bus so that they don't sit next to you. Go somewhere without a towel, but if you do, don't panic. Locking eyes with the nurse drawing your blood, or moaning while getting your blood drawn, or staring into your dentist's soul while they're trying to fill a cavity. Repeatedly saying melons on a train angrier and angrier as you say it, and then on the last time saying it like you're finally at peace. Getting ready to leave the house by putting on sock shoe instead of sock shoe. Shower socks. Talking to yourself in public. Closing a glass door directly in someone's face and staring at them through it with no expression. Waiting on a street corner without looking at your phone. Sitting on a park bench eating flies from a bag. Taking vertical videos. Well then, that makes my mom a psychopath. Yeah, well, we all knew that. Walking slowly in a downpour. As someone who loves rain, I do this every chance I get. I'll also roll down the window while driving in the rain. Introverts. What social interaction takes your battery down to 0% instantly? Oh, easy. Anywhere where there's loud noise or a lot of noise. I travel a lot in my work, and it often includes staying in a remote city for 2 or 3 days, doing full work days at a customer's facility, and then coming back home. My survival techniques are hotels. I find them calming, as they're like airports. You've seen one, you've seen most of them. I got sent to a remote facility, but the customer's liaison guy invites me to their home instead. I politely decline, and I try all of the excuses in the book, but he's not taking no for an answer. Eventually, he starts to get insulted, and my boss tells me we kinda need this deal and asks me to go. After the flight, I get picked up and we do a full day at the facility, then we go to the guy's house. They have 2 children who are hyper and think I'm there just to play with them. I try my best to show happy face, but internally my battery has already been dry for a long time. Finally, the kids go somewhere and I think I have some time off, but now the guy offers me a beer. Okay, I tell him I've been trying to distance myself from alcohol, but he still drinks a couple of beers and becomes annoyingly talkative. At this point, I'm screaming internally. It's around 9 p.m. and I see this as a good time to go. It's been a long day. I think I'll go check my email and stuff and go to sleep, and I head upstairs, which has my room. I hear them talking. The wife is telling the guy that I might see them as bad hosts if he leaves me alone. The husband, however, wants to drink more beer, so the wife comes up. To my horror, I have absolutely nothing in common with her. She starts talking about their kids and goes on for over half an hour of oversharing the details about their life, while my brain has already frozen from the whole situation. Finally, I get to sleep, and I get woken up over an hour before my time, as apparently the family has super long breakfasts, where they just slowly eat and chat about stuff. I have zero energy left from the previous day and I just stare into the void, while the whole family watches a stupid cartoon and they deeply analyze what's going on. I'm supposed to be having 2 to 3 more days of this, but I call my boss when I get a break and I tell him I can't take this anymore. He now realizes I'm not joking and arranges an emergency job for the next day. So after the second day is done, we agree that the finishing touches will be done remotely now that the hardware's installed, and after the day I finally head back to the airport. My host is noticeably upset, and on the way to the airport he tells me he had their relatives coming tonight, and he had hoped we all could have done something together. In short, my social interaction battery shorts and dies if I don't get a hotel for multi-day on-site jobs. Okay, so the narrator is definitely an outgoing introvert, and I'm capable of batting down the hatches for all sorts of situations. But this household seems like an innavigable nightmare to me. Constant face-to-face contact and questioning, combined with rambunctious kids? Who can deal with that? Also, did they invite you over to save the company money, or are they actually that psychotically social? Hey, let's get a drink, you and me. Sure. And then at the pub, oh, when I said just you and me, I actually meant you, me, and my friend from uni that you don't know, but with whom I go way back and will talk to all night while ignoring you. And then I'll just get lost for an extra long bathroom break, leaving the 2 of you alone to the conversational equivalent of a hedgehog screwing a tortoise. Office team buildings, or any employment-related mandatory fun. From an introvert who delivers these sort of team-building exercises, don't worry, the other side is just as draining. family gatherings with loud music, crowded places, people who don't know how to stop talking. Now imagine being in a crowded place with someone who won't shut up. Arguments can drain me from 100% to 0 real fast. Confrontation in general, I'd say, is my arch nemesis. It's even worse when it's a pointless one. It's bad enough when you're listening to one, it really bums the mood, never mind when you're put in one personally. Every time I get into one, I always lose and can't get a rebuttal in because I don't know what to say half the time due to stutters that quickly make any manner of gathered thought shatter to pieces. In short, I suck at arguments. When you're at a party where everyone else knows each other, I hate going to parties where I know one or maybe two people. You want to interact with them but don't want to follow them around like a little puppy dog because you don't want to talk to anyone else. Work. Customer service has made my skin crawl since day one, but it does pay the bills. Unexpected people at a gathering, or many people coming and going. My in-laws always seem to have a lot of random people living with them, and you truly never know who's going to be at their house until you walk in the door. I can't prepare myself if I don't know how many or which people I can expect to see. My mother-in-law also tends to bring random people with her whenever invited over. Well, they were at the house when we left and they wanted to come too. I hate having unexpected strangers in my house. It instantly takes away the feeling of it being my safe zone. So it's probably not surprising that I don't invite my in-laws over very often. It's extremely rare that I go to their house. They wanted to come too. I guess that's because mother-in-law invited them and told them it would be fine and that you have a more the merrier attitude like her. And that it would be fun. Turns out it's completely awkward, you're angry, stressed and uncomfortable, and the guest is uncomfortable too. And the mother-in-law is oblivious. I'm an extreme introvert, and while I love the idea of meeting new and interesting people, it's hard to do when the group is already familiar with each other and you're just the outlier trying to listen to everything said and read everyone so you can at least try to jump in and act like you're part of the group. But instead, you're just sort of the quiet one for the day unless someone talks to you or you find an opening. Running into an old friend you've grown distant from. Like, do we acknowledge each other and have a full-on conversation? Or do we just do the head nod and move on? Okay, let's go around the room and everyone say a little something about themselves. Now everyone get into groups of 2. Look around the room, everyone is somehow already partnered up and 10 milliseconds flat. Damn it. Going to any store where it's packed. If I see a store or restaurant that's too crowded, I just leave immediately. I just refuse to have to deal with that. One-sided conversations. The first moment they talk over or interrupt and don't say, "Sorry I interrupted what you were saying," my battery just drains instantly. Anything after work. Work is draining enough. The arranged by management after-work activities that are not required at all, but if you don't go you get tagged as not a team player, those kinds of events are the worst. Bonus points if they revolve around drinking and you don't drink. I'm pretty sure my career at my current company is over due to not drinking with the manager after work. Going to places and then more people being there than I expected. Just a couple of days ago, I had plans for me and 2 friends to just chill at my house, and somehow I got roped into going somewhere else with 5 or 6 people. I spent most of the time hanging back on my phone. Definitely when you can't get your words into a conversation. You make an honest effort to be more outward, but people talk over you and you just give up. Why are you shy? Why don't you talk? Why are you shy is a baffling lack of awareness about people's inherent mental blocks that I just don't understand. One of my dear friends has a sleeping problem and was advised by one of his colleagues to just get a good night's sleep to just feel better. It feels like the same amount of breathtaking stupidity. When the really sweet, fast-talking 13-year-old girl from across the street sees me out front and comes over with yet another little bracelet she's made for me, I don't hear well, in addition to being an introvert, and her chirpy little voice is incomprehensible. I don't want to be rude to her and wouldn't want to hurt her feelings over anything in the world, but I don't want to be her grandma, so it's very stressful. Kids are usually very receptive if you just explain what your problem is. I'm sure if she's a sweet enough kid to make you a bracelet, then she'll happily understand if you explain your hearing issue. One-on-one interactions where I'm in any sort of charge. Anytime I'm leading around a new hire or an intern at work and need to take them around all day, take them to lunch, stuff like that. It's exhausting. Being on point and being responsible for another person's experience of their day is just so much pressure. That's it for me too. New trainee day is the worst. There's a stranger, I have to interact with them one-on-one, all frickin' day. I genuinely care about them and want them to do well. I know that their progress depends on me, at least somewhat, which means I need to do well, but seriously, when it's halfway through the shift and I need a break, am I doing my best? Training is usually followed by a one-on-one meeting with a supervisor about the trainee and their progress. Please just let me crawl into a beer. Having to engage in small talk really wears me down. Like 2 sentences in and I'm exhausted. I love deep conversations, but small talk just kills my soul. I've been looking for this, especially when it's an extrovert that can't stand silence. Car rides with them are so draining because you're essentially trapped, and since they can't have silence, it's a constant conversation. I mean, my man, if you drain all my energy, we're gonna crash. Helpful advice that's really just a bunch of judgments of your life choices in disguise. Also, any conversation where someone starts suggesting an essential oil blend will solve all of my problems. It would just take less effort to say, all interactions with my mother-in-law, I guess. I used to have acne like a normal teenager and everyone tried to help me. I never ask for help. First day of a new school. In-laws. When people say something snide and I can't for the life of me tell if they're joking, sarcastic, or serious. Large parties or anywhere with booming music and drunk people. I can handle groups just fine, but all of this loud music and the shouting gets me in 10 minutes. Listening to someone boast. Being on the receiving end of an extrovert monologuing in a social situation where I need to play along or be friendly and engaged for whatever reason. So, why are you so quiet? Basically just being taken to a club or party where I know no one and one of these things is guaranteed to occur. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Someone commenting on how much you talk. Either, wow, talkative today, or Sally sure is quiet. It's like, I was comfortable until you had to start treating me like you were tourists at a zoo exhibit. Corporate functions. I'm on the spectrum, but I've learned how to bullcrap my way through over the years. I manage several teams, and honestly, they don't need much managing. They're so awesome at what they do, so I let them run pretty much autonomously. I clear roadblocks, which I do quite effectively because I have the time to formulate, write, edit, or rewrite any emails before they get sent, but in live group functions it takes so much effort to be on the spot, it's just draining. An overly happy person, to the point where you think they're either faking it or wonder if they are actually that happy all the time. For me, it's the energy. It's hard to be around someone that has really high energy. When I'm at a party with my husband where I don't know anyone, and he has to leave to go get beer or go to the bathroom or help someone else, that's when the nightmare starts. Malls. I hate malls. So crowded and teenagers are usually out there in groups. They're sometimes so loud and trashy, and I get flashbacks to high school. That's the worst. Thank frick for online shopping. Waitresses flirting for tips. Likewise, flirty or demanding customers. For me, right now, it's mostly talking to someone I don't know that well one-on-one. I don't like small talk. I prefer deep discussion of things, and if I don't know the person, it's hard to find a topic to go into a deep discussion about. That's why I prefer to have a few people to talk to at a time, so they can talk about whatever they want to talk about, and I could just add something when I have something to add, instead of having to constantly think about what I had to say next. Mandatory team-building exercises at work. Look, I have nothing against my coworkers, they're so nice, and I like them enough to make chit-chat with them. I don't like them enough to do some stupid team-building activity that just wastes time and is nowhere near as fun as the organizer wants it to be. Going to Walmart. Specifically, Walmart and only Walmart. That place drains my soul. I can go in happy, energetic, and social, and leave wanting to lie down and not be alive in the parking lot while yelling at whoever was unlucky enough to come with me. I think we all have that one store. For the narrator, it's actually IKEA. Maybe it's the fact that I can only go when there's horrifying quantities of families and there's screaming kids in there. Maybe it's the fact that it's a mega drive away, or maybe it's the fact that I have to walk through a fricking maze to get to the one item I actually want. Sorry, folks. Struck a nerve there. Got any plans for the weekend? As well as, Happy Monday. Did you do anything fun this weekend? My wife will tell me, my friend is inviting her husband out to lunch. I want you to meet him. I called out to work the next day because I didn't get my alone time that day on my scheduled day off. I hate that. All the guys in that situation have in common is that we know half of a friendship pair. The funny thing is, neither guy wants to be there. You're just there to keep him out of their conversation. You want me to meet him? Whatever. I have my own friends and I'm not taking applicants. When seemingly benign topics of conversation set people off into outraged rants about how either everything's a conspiracy or how everyone is out to screw them over. And every time you either disagree with them or try to clarify your point, they double down and catastrophize even more. I mean, F me for making small talk. Anyone yelling at me, I just black out and have no idea what I said. Family gatherings, I start blabbering, but I have no idea what I said. Then I feel so tired afterwards, like I've done heavy labor. Being a +1 to my boyfriend. I have a serious face and everyone keeps asking what's wrong. So I have to smile a lot so they leave me the frick alone. Here is the list of things that are setting me on the path to becoming a low-level Batman villain. Screaming kids or babies. They're fine when they're playing or happy. Screaming adults. People who play loud music in public. Large gatherings of people, like in cities and stuff. Full buses and subways. And people who try to interact with me even though I'm wearing headphones if it's not important. When someone I don't like tries to speak to me. That seems really general, I know, but it just makes me feel dead inside. Enjoying quality time by myself and someone decides to invite themselves to hang out, like if I'm playing a game and then they try to teach me how to play. Ugh. I hate people who just drop by. If I wanted you to be there, I'd have invited you. I just stand in the doorway and talk to them and don't invite them in. A sudden, unexpected and unplanned invitation to someone's house or party or whatever. I need time to prepare mentally and such. All social interactions, though that's more my social anxiety doing that. Grocery shopping. For whatever reason, that's the bane of my existence. I hate feeling like I'm holding up the line, feeling people judge me for every purchase I make, then looking awkward, bagging the groceries and taking them home. I legitimately only go grocery shopping when it's dark and raining so that no one's there. And I've gone days without eating anything because I was too anxious of going. Also, hair salons, where for some reason people always expect me to talk to them, and the conversation always ends up at, "So, what do you do? Oh, you study philosophy. Can you even find a job in that field? You're gonna be poor." Do you have a girlfriend yet? No! Just no! Is it really that hard for people to understand some of us just can't attract anyone? Take your platitudes into the deepest recesses of your rectal cavities. There's a beautiful thing called natural evolution, and some people just die alone. That's it. Corporate networking. Going to a crowded place with many children. Tough luck for me, I have a 3-year-old with another on the way. IKEA, especially with someone who just wants to meander idly around. I don't even know why, but I get about half an hour into an IKEA trip, and I get flashes back to a childhood spent largely being dragged by my parents around that blue and yellow Swedish hellscape. IKEA is my personal hell. Good kitchenware, though. Really? I find IKEA weirdly therapeutic, like a create-your-own-adventure sort of thing. Being forced to stay. I'm an extrovert, but nightclubs drain me. It's not really interaction, but simulates it badly. When any elderly family member asks you what you do in life, and you can't figure anything since you're anxiety personified and you just make up some bullcrap. The narrator just tells older family members that he works on computers on the internet, and that seems to at least content the ones who are over 70. If they ask for specifics, though, that's on you. Icebreaker activities. The level of hate I have for icebreaker activities cannot be measured. Messing up mid-sentence and bluggling to messing up mid-sentence and struggling to correct yourself. Pretty much when there's more than 10 people in my vicinity. It's like all the extroverts suck the energy out of me. Being excluded during any activity or conversation, like they can convince you to go with them or do something with them, and then they pretty much ignore you the whole time. That makes me want to go home and do nothing. Working with people, or any customer service job to be honest. Interacting with extroverts who are superficial, acting in a winner or loser competition. Everything has to be about them and how great they are. Exhausting. Semi-formal work functions. Watching a movie with family that's about boring crap. And then comes a bedroom scene and everyone pretends they have no idea what's happening, and if I get up to go pee or grab a drink, they insist on pausing it when I was just wanting it to be over. Sitting at a long table at an event. I always end up at an end where there are more people I don't know, and it's too awkward to get up and stand down near the end where I do know people, or shout across other people to make conversation. Any activity that requires my participation be upbeat and into it. Oh, here we go. First, the hair salon. I have long hair, so I'm there for 1 to 3 hours depending on the service I'm having done. I force myself to talk to my hairstylist so he or she doesn't get bored. And then there's social gatherings with co-workers. I work for the state in different offices, So I know a lot of people, and even though I'm usually quiet, everyone wants to talk to me or be my friend. I do my best one-on-one with people and like to talk about something meaningful instead of chit-chat. Job interviews, especially when they're longer than 30 minutes. When people start talking about me or my life. Groups of people where everyone's talking. That's an instant, I need to leave the room moment. I also have a coworker whose favorite hobby is angrily telling stories about his personal life to my other boss. I think he uses it to vent his frustrations, and they both clearly enjoy chatting with each other. But my god, he just sounds so angry to the point of almost yelling. Nope, nope. Continuing a date with someone that I realize I have no interest in halfway through. The mere thought of having to talk to people. I can't stand pretending that I frickin' care about anything. I just want to die. Whenever someone says, "You're so good at this. How are you so good?" Please just stop saying that to me already. People who start conversations with the sole intent of saying what's in their head at the time and nothing else. Conversations usually imply some level of listening. When someone starts talking to me about your dumb crap they saw on the news, and then trying to get me to agree with them instead of actually talking about it, I lose all hope for humanity. I just end up smiling and nodding and waiting for it to be over. Parent night or other school functions. I'm an elementary school teacher and I'm pretty okay with interacting with the students because it's like a switch I can flip on and perform during the day. But talking with a room full of adults makes me want to die. It's so nerve-wracking and it makes me all sweaty. What's the most morally questionable thing you've ever done? When I was in college, a few friends and I had noticed that on football game days, alumni would pay $10 to park in the driveways and yards of houses next to the football stadium. We found a house that nobody was at and started waving cars onto the lawn. We charged folks and nobody thought to ask us if we actually lived there or had permission to do this. Once we filled the lawn, we took our money and just ran off. We spent the ill-gotten gains on underage drinking. Reminds me of the story of the guy who just showed up at the parking lot and started charging people for parking. Did it for like 20 years and then just stopped showing up one day and everyone wondered where he went. He never actually worked for the building or anything, he just took people's money every day. That guy is my hero. I stole my friend's Lego Shark submarine set in the 3rd grade. He had brought it to show and tell and left it there all week to be admired. I told my parents I won it in a competition. The class searched high and low to no avail, but everyone was none the wiser. After a few days, I started to feel pretty guilty. After a few more, I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't even enjoy the coolest Lego set of all time. I took it to school the next day, took it out of my bag when no one was looking, and pretended to find it in a corner. My teacher was definitely onto me. God, I was a little jerk. Jerk or not, you did do the right thing. Your teacher didn't rat you out because she knew all the guilt was killing you. Not only that, but punishing someone for doing the right thing is the best way to discourage children from ever doing the right thing. Not as questionable as the others on here, but whatever. When I was in 3rd grade, I was in Catholic school, and my parents and I went to Berrien's bookstore, which is a Christian store, and I stole a bracelet from there. When my parents asked where I got it, I said I got it from a friend. They called up that friend's mum, and I had to confess everything and bring it back to the store. The best or worst part was that the bracelet said, "What would Jesus do?" I replaced the school time capsule with adult magazines. 8th grade class. And no, I didn't chip up some cement-sealed time capsule. Every year 1 social studies class would get some newspapers, Time and Newsweek kinds of things, that used to be important. Students would write notes to themselves, bury it in the baseball field, and dig it up at the year's end. I wish I could say I knew what happened, because I was a freshman in high school by then. I got the idea from the previous year. Put in some hustlers as well, the real good stuff. We actually loved the teacher. He was a great guy who was a bit pompous. We also did donuts on his grassy front lawn when my friend got his driver's license. I still remember my friend saying, "Cloaking device on," and turning off the headlights as he drove up to his lawn. Ah, the 80s. This does seem to basically have been ripped straight from an 80s hijinks movie. Although, to be honest, a 1-year time capsule does seem a bit pointless. You're all still going to remember what you put in by then. Although, the more I think about it, all capsules of a shorter intended duration than 50 years or so do seem a bit pointless. Oh great, kids from 20 years ago were also drawing pictures with crayons. Color me frickin' mind blown. I used to bartend at a sports bar, and there was this group of tap-out D-bag regulars who were just outright crappy customers. They got handsy with the waitresses, they'd run up $150 tabs, and always complained about what was rung up. They never tipped. Frickin' jerks. Anyways, a couple of them came in on a Sunday night about midnight. It had been snowing like a son of a witch, so the bar was empty. These guys started talking down to me like I was the help, and I just said, frick it. I started feeding them Huff and Puff shots, which are Grand Marnier and Drambuie, and telling them they were on the house because you're my best customers. These guys turned the heat way up and could barely walk by last call. When I was closing down, I told them I was calling them a cab. Instead, I call the cops, give them the description of the guy's truck and his tag number, and tell dispatch that they're in the parking lot. I go tell the guys that the cab won't be there for another half hour, and they say, frick that, and load up in the truck. They were literally backing out of the parking lot when the cops rolled up. Cop goes to the car and the driver blows cigarette smoke in his face. Classic mistake. Gets yanked out of the car by the cop, and then his buddy decides to come to the rescue with drunk haymakers. Only he's 5 yards away from the cop and it's icy as F. Both of them get arrested, and the driver now rides a bicycle to work. This is why you treat bartenders well, friends. I give 50% at my regular dive, and those girls would watch me murder someone in cold blood and tell the cops that that person attacked me first. They'd also let me wipe the tapes. But seriously, it's worth it to have a bartender on your side, and not just for the free or stronger drinks. This girl in my area, whose family owns a very good restaurant, liked me. I talked to her for a while and ate there for free several times. I had no interest in her. I did it for the food. A friend of mine I met in hospital while receiving chemo treatments did the deed with 5 girls that were friends with each other using the line, I don't want to die a virgin. He wasn't even a virgin for the first one. When I was 18, I tickled my pickle to pictures of my sister-in-law. I tried to drive a substanced-up rave girl home. She ended up lying to me about where she lived, and after telling me 2 different addresses across town, for a total drive time of 2 hours, I ended up kicking her out onto the street. Morally questionable? Well, about 9 years ago I purchased a top-of-the-line laptop from Best Buy. I also purchased their accidental coverage insurance. I dropped that laptop as a legitimate accident 2 years later, and they gave me a laptop of similar specs. Well, since it was 2 years later, I got a top-of-the-line laptop for that year for absolutely free. I bought the same accidental insurance. Ever since then, I've been accidentally dropping laptops every 2 years and getting a brand fricking new one for $100. I wanted a pet rabbit, but I didn't want to buy one. I wanted to catch my own. I learned that feral rabbits have a 10% chance of survival once a human takes them home. Long story short, I caught 10 rabbits to increase the odds of one of them surviving. Tossing ants into a spider web. I still cringe remembering that. But, I mean, from the spider's perspective, you were doing a pretty nice thing. Sort of like helping a hungry old lady pick out a chicken at a butcher shop. My family was really poor. I was shopping at the local Safeway, and this rude and snobby witch was making my life miserable. I don't remember the details anymore, it was like 22 years ago, but I remember how angry I was at her when I was waiting for my ride to bring around the car. She ran her cart into my leg in some aisle and claimed it was my fault, and then later she cut in line in front of me with all of her stuff, wrote a check, and then there was some issue with that where she screamed at the cashier or something. I really can't remember. Then she accused me of looking at her in some lascivious manner. She was this really fat, snobby, old Dolores Umbridge kind of woman in a fancy polyester suit. I was so angry at her wealthy, boxed wine drinking existence, I just snapped. I am not proud of what I did next, no matter how poor I was. It was wrong, I just got swept up on my own poor existence near Christmas. This woman had just left her shopping cart piled high with goodies right next to me while she waddled to her minivan. When my ride pulled up, he asked if both carts were mine. I didn't even consider it. I said yes without thinking. I have never packed a trunk so fast. It must have been $400 in groceries in addition to my normal budget of $80 of food for a week. I got home and my wife was stunned. Where did you get the money for a whole roast? I confessed to her. She was shocked, but we ended up having a pretty good Christmas that year. So you stole $400 worth of stuff from a stranger because you didn't like her. Not cool, dude. When an old dealer of mine got busted while driving, we knew where he kept his stash, so we broke into his house and ganked his stuff. At the time, we justified it as trying to help clear his house of anything incriminating. Ooh. Do you all remember the Xbox 360 Red Rings of Death? Well, they happened to me. I was out of warranty and I was angry. So I went and bought a new one and took it apart and installed it in my old case. Then I took my old one and put in the new case and returned it. I paid with cash so they couldn't track me. I thought I was the man for sticking it to Microsoft. I was at work. I opened the fridge. There was a chocolate pudding snack inside. I don't know what happened, but something came over me and I just took it and hid it in my jacket pocket only to enjoy it a few hours later in the car. I had so much anxiety coming to work the next day, scared that someone was going to want to know where their pudding was. Fortunately for me, nothing ever came of it. I still learned my lesson though. Maybe it's just because it's relatable, but for some reason this story of someone stealing somebody else's work treat actually makes me angrier than the other stories. It's really dumb that it makes me this pent up. I guess the ones about doing things like leaving delirious substance users in the middle of nowhere or stealing $400 of groceries just seem so impossible in my life, but I can imagine getting to the end of a long Monday with an entire depressing week ahead of me and then realizing the one thing I had to console myself in the fridge was gone. I randomly received a $450 projector to my house from Amazon. I didn't order it, didn't pay for it, but it had my name on the box, so I was keeping it. Also, the week before, I ordered a ukulele case for $25, and there was a free ukulele inside, worth $200. I didn't return that either. When I was in 7th grade, a kid told me that since I was black, I had to do what he said. I peed in a super soaker and I sprayed him with it. 7 years later, a different friend was helping me move. He finds the super soaker, pumps it, and pretend sprays me. Unfortunately, there was 7-year-old fermented urine in it, and I got covered. My eyes burned for an hour. Karma is a real witch. Oh, well, I've got a few. In high school, I took a dump in another school's drum case at a marching band competition. Recently, my vacuum cleaner crapped out on me. I went to Walmart and I brought another of the same model and used the parts to repair mine. I put the bad parts together in the new vacuum, boxed it back up, and took it back to Walmart for a full refund. The old vacuum was scratched and scuffed. I kinda knew I probably wouldn't have any problems at the return desk, but I wanted to be sure. Regarding the drum case, though, those guys were just jerks. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Very messy situation, but my sister asked me to give her money for substances. She basically said that if I didn't, she'd go and rob to get money for it. She was trying to recover from addiction and had a 5-year-old son. My nephew was living with his dad in another state, but my sister was trying to get to a place where she could get visitation. I really didn't want to get involved in that part of her life, but if she were arrested, she'd have been sent to prison for several years and have had no chance to get visitation, let alone guardianship. I ended up giving her money for substances that night, hoping that I could keep her out of jail and maybe get her into rehab soon. I know now that I was just enabling her, but it just hurt too badly to see her throw everything away. There's some positivity to it. She's now in school, working, and has a beautiful 2-year-old daughter. She's also 2 years sober. I have no idea what would have happened if I'd done things differently. I'm just trying to be happy and supportive of her now. Unfortunately, she still doesn't get to visit her son very much, but she's getting there. For our high school senior trip, our school always went to a ski resort a few hours away. My friends and I decided that we'd drive up instead of taking the bus with some others, because we wanted to bring booze and didn't want to risk not being able to get some. We were underage. Well, word of what we were doing started spreading, and more people came up to us and asked us to buy them booze too and bring it with us. Before we knew it, we had dozens of requests, and everyone was willing to pay us double, even triple the cost of the alcohol. We decided to rent a van because at this point we'd be hauling over $3,000 worth of booze. Unfortunately, we weren't the smartest bunch and started getting a little cocky with this new business venture we'd created. We started going up to all the grads and telling them what we were doing. Soon after that, we had $5,000 worth of booze orders. This one girl, frickin' Jillian, came up to us and asked us to buy her a 12-pack. No problem. The night before we were to leave, frickin' Jillian is sitting at dinner with her family who were telling her the dangers of trying to buy alcohol illegally from liquor stores. "Don't worry, parents," she says. "Some kids at our school are taking orders and bringing it for us." Fricking Jillian's parents call the school and tell them everything. I got called into the office because Jillian had come to me for the order and basically got my butt handed to me. I'd have been expelled if my mum hadn't begged the principal to take pity. And there could have been a criminal case, but luckily for us we hadn't bought the booze yet, so there was no evidence. I took the punishment like a man and never ratted out on my 3 co-conspirator friends. I got 7 days suspension, 3 additional in-school suspension days, and I couldn't go on the grad trip. I also became my vice principal's errand boy for the remaining few weeks, and she made me do random things like help stock the cafeteria, clean up the smoke pit, stuff like that. The entire senior trip got delayed by 2 days. They called a school-wide assembly to tell them our scandalous ways and tell them the dangers of underage drinking. All in all, I got a pretty awesome story out of it and learned only one lesson. Do not ever trust Jillian. In short, created an illegal enterprise for our senior high school trip and almost made thousands of dollars. When I realized that the arcade weighed my winning tickets on a scale to count them, I went outside and added rocks. I went from 1,500 tickets to 8,000 and I got a PlayStation. On the night I was going to ask my ex-girlfriend to marry me, she dumped me for a guy she had dated when she was in high school. The next week I invited her twin sister out for some drinks and we proceeded to sleep together. This might pale in comparison, but I felt pretty bad about it for a while. I work in support services at an elementary school and I deal with a lot of behavioral issues. On a particularly stressful day, I had a first grader in my office because she was being so disruptive that she could no longer be in class without it distracting everyone. Of course, her presence in my office was equally distracting to me, and I was getting more annoyed than usual, especially because this was a kid who was normally really well behaved and was clearly just attention-seeking. After about an hour of her sitting in my office, refusing to talk to me about her behavior, another first grader came in to offer me one of her leftover birthday cupcakes. As she was leaving, she asked if she should leave another one for the other student, the one with the issues. I told her that the other girl didn't deserve a cupcake, and the birthday girl left to continue handing the extra cupcakes out to staff. Behavioral issue girl was visibly displeased. Feeling particularly spiteful and annoyed that day, I unwrapped the cupcake while making eye contact with behavior issue girl, licked my lips and ever so slowly ate the delicious treat. Now, this was a baked by Melissa mini cupcake that I could have eaten in one bite, but I made it last five bites, all while making direct eye contact with the girl. She cried. It was worth it, but in retrospect, it was probably a little unnecessary. I did not use a coaster at a small gathering at the house of a stranger. I once stole my best friend's shiny Zapdos Pokemon card. I went number 2 in my coworker's private bathroom every day after work and I never flushed. She installed a new lock and handle, a padlock on it, which I lockpicked every day and dropped a deuce in. After 2 to 3 months, she went on a tirade at a company meeting about people crapping in her office, and our CEO fired her. Don't worry though, she was a horrible person and fired people because she didn't like them or because of the way they dressed. Scum of the earth. Look, the narrator has got to put it out there that he doesn't condone any of this stuff, and none of you should be inspired by it. But it does have a certain cathartic satisfaction to watch absolute jerks get their comeuppance, doesn't it? On the Am I the Jerk channel, we call the enactors of these misdeeds jerk vigilantes. Subscribe to the Am I the Jerk channel for all your vicarious jerk vigilante needs. Living with my girlfriend for 2.5 years because I needed a roommate to help pay for rent, so I could get a place big enough to set up a small recording studio in. She was head over heels for me and I just didn't care about her at all. I've cheated on her 5 times and told her about the first 2. She told me she just didn't want to know at that point, so I haven't told her about the ones that happened after that conversation. I've warned her from the beginning that I'll never feel anything for her because I have some specifically diagnosed and medicated brain disorders that make me incapable of doing so. The lease is up in August and I'm moving out then. She is a horribly messy roommate, and I'm a neat freak and I'm tired of it. And I got a massive raise a few months ago and I'm fully capable of paying for a place big enough on my own now. I cheated on a girl I didn't really care about who's probably one of the nicest people in the world. I hate myself for doing it, but I was young and couldn't say no to a drop-dead gorgeous ex. I think it just seemed morally ambiguous because, at the time, I didn't think much of the relationship and I knew she'd never find out. So, what difference would it really make? Who would it really hurt? My moral compass has since changed, but morals are a fluid and personal thing. Just because you think something is morally wrong, it doesn't mean everyone else does. I mean, it used to be against social morals to open your business on Sundays. I'm 22, and this is the only thing I actually regret in my life so far. It happened last summer when I'd freshly gotten out of a very long relationship. To say that I was happy to be single is an understatement, and I clung to my no commitments, have fun and be wild mindset throughout this entire thing. I'm a lesbian who met another lesbian through friends at a 4th of July party. There was chemistry, but she told me she had a girlfriend straight away. We texted occasionally. She always initiated it, and though it was always flirty, she mentioned her girlfriend often. I definitely wasn't trying to pursue this girl, though. We ended up hanging out with a mutual friend at a bar soon after. Too much alcohol was consumed and we hooked up that night. Then we hooked up the next night, and for about 4 more weeks. I don't even know why I did this. It's not like I was insanely attracted to her. I think it was just the first real attention I'd received since being newly single, and I thought, well, it's not like I'm the one in a relationship. And it gets worse. I ended up going to a concert a few weeks later with a small group of people. That girl and her girlfriend were present. I had been doing the deed with that girl the night before. You'd think that I'd feel guilty about being around this unknowing girlfriend, right? No. We subtly flirted in front of her, and it was fun. We were all drunk and ended up going to a house party right after. The girl I'd been sleeping with was the drunkest and passed out hard in a spare bedroom. A few hours later, it was 3 a.m. and the 3 people who were still awake walked to my friend's house to crash. Me, my friend, and that chick's girlfriend. No clue why the girlfriend went with us. The girlfriend seems cool and she's hot. I actually was attracted to her that night, which made me feel strange for sure. She seemed to be flirting with me. At first, I think I might just be imagining it because I'm wasted. The flirting was persistent, and I admit that I'm loving my newfound attention. My friend goes to sleep in her room and leaves me and the girlfriend to sleep on the couches. This is where it's all fuzzy. The girlfriend eventually came to my couch and we hooked up. We woke up, cuddled, and I was extremely confused. You'd think this chick would freak out, but instead she told me how attractive she thinks I am, and she said that she'd been threatened the last month or 2 of having her girlfriend hang out with me. Rightly so, I mean, frick. I noped out of there and I went home to question my identity. The girlfriend manages to get my phone number and a few days later hits me up again. I hate to admit I slept with this chick for about 2 weeks. Both of these girls were cheating on each other with the same person. They'd be texting me at the same time, and probably when they were with each other. The part of me that I didn't even know existed found some sick satisfaction in this at times, but for the most part I felt like I didn't even know myself. I finally just ended it and cold turkey stopped responding to both. At the time, this felt like the weirdest thing that had ever happened to me, but I know I shouldn't have gone along with it. You definitely are the company you keep, and I felt like a piece of crap towards the end of it. Whenever I think about it, my skin crawls. What's the weirdest thing a parent found out about their child? The first real noises that my baby daughter learned to make, other than crying of course, were growls. We found out in the middle of the night through the baby monitor. The creepiest thing I ever discovered while babysitting was that this 7-year-old had a dead fly pile. He made a game out of catching flies with his bare hands, but unlike normal people who'd just walk away from the scene of the crime, he decided to keep them as trophies or something. So, in the bottom of his closet, he had a little pile of dead flies no one else knew about. I didn't say anything. My 2 nieces were playing with some post-it notes at my mother's house. The younger one was writing little messages on them and sticking them on things. I love you, hello, stuff like that. I walked past one of them just to hear the older one quietly telling the younger one to write one to grandma saying you're gonna kill her. I was babysitting 2 kids for my sister, who was the usual babysitter. The little girl was eating and turned to me and says, "We could fit Diva in the freezer." Diva was a Pomeranian. I replied, "But that wouldn't be very nice. Finish your dinner and then you can have dessert." She started eating again and stopped mid-bite. "We can fit Rocky in the microwave." Rocky is an even smaller Pomeranian. I say, let's not do that. It freaked me out a little bit. Why did she want to put her dogs in the kitchen appliances? About 2 weeks ago, my wife was playing outside with our kids. A 2-year-old boy and a 1-year-old girl. She ran inside to get them some water or something, and when she came back outside, my son had lost all of his clothes and was going number 2 in the driveway. Another one I know is my friend's little brother used to go through magazines and cut out all of the women's chests from all the pages in a magazine and keep them in a plastic bag under his bed that was labeled in black magic marker, the boo-boo bag. I went into my 6-year-old son's room at around 10 o'clock at night when he was supposed to be asleep because I could see from the hallway that he was using a flashlight. Turns out he was undressed from the waist down and had stretched the skin of his little baggie taut and was shining the flashlight through the skin to make his room glow a soft red color. The narrator has to level with you. He's been scrolling through the stories for a while now to try and find a few non-naughty bit related stories, but it's going to be more or less silly kids being totally socially inappropriate from here on out. And let's not judge. Kids play with the things they have at hand, and most of our parents could unearth similar, or worse, stories about us that we've probably repressed. So, with that in mind, my younger brother, when he was about 3, started this game where he'd pretend his downstairs equipment was an automatic weapon. So, you could just be wandering around the house and he'd run up to you, completely undressed, screaming, with his equipment in one hand, going, "You're dead." My 6-year-old cousin tried bending and snapping his wee-wee because it was occasionally getting in the way. He's fine. My 6-year-old too. A month ago, he got so angry. I heard him frustrated in his room, and I came down the hall to see what the problem was. He was struggling with his undies, and his little unit was like a tent pole. He was trying to tuck it into his unders, and when I asked him what the problem was, he said to me, "Papa, it won't go down." The innocence. It made me smile. My mom told me a story that I once casually strolled into her ladies' night gathering, carrying a box of tampons, and I handed them out as welcome gifts. I was 5, had no idea what tampons were for, and am male. It was a different brand than she used. When I was younger, I found my mom's tampons and I thought they were bulbs. I decided the only thing to do was plant them in neat rows in the yard. My grandma found it hilarious and my mom wasn't too happy. My female cousin and her female friend, I don't remember how old they were, but pretty young, they had the amazing idea of playing doctor. Little did I know that this would include shoving sting nettles where the sun don't shine. My parents, sadly, have shared it to me as well as most of their friends. When I was a little kid and was being potty trained, I somehow got the idea that I'd go number 2 like my dog, so I'd go out in the backyard and do it. My family was at our friend's birthday party at their house, and I ended up going out in their backyard, and their dog ate it afterwards. Not a parent, but when my brother was younger, about 4 years old I think, he had his own number 1 and 2 in Play-Doh containers under his bed. My mum found it while she was cleaning his room. He said he was practicing to be a doctor. When my son was young, maybe 3, he was in the backyard playing on this toy. I think it was a plastic horse that you rocked back and forth on. He suddenly stopped and got this weird look on his face and said, "Wee wee tickles." After a couple of seconds, his face changed to alarm and he shouted, "Wee wee hurts." I imagine it was one of his first tent pitchings and he didn't know what was happening. My son asked me to get a particular film. It was an 80s film and it wasn't on Netflix, so I started to browse torrent sites to see if there was a copy of it. I click on one of those fake download now buttons and a pop-up opens depicting a girl with her cheeks spread. I close it as fast as I can. "Daddy, was that a butthole? Can I see it again?" My wife and I had a back massager. When my son was around 12, he left the dinner table to go to the bathroom. The ceiling started vibrating 10 minutes later. Our master bedroom was right above the dining room, so I went upstairs to check, only to see him lying face down on the massager, occasionally giggling. Without seeing each other, I just went back downstairs and explained to our dinner guests that we were having an electrical problem. My parents caught my 12-year-old brother with 3-gallon jugs filled with urine below his bathroom sink. When they asked him what it was for, he said, "So I can tell how much pee I make." A few years later, he got arrested for throwing human and dog feces mixed with human urine in balloons at cars. I had one of those life-size walking dolls when I was a kid. My mum was babysitting this little boy. He was maybe 4. He found this doll, which was truly life-size for him, brings it out to the living room and started dancing with it. So cute. Then he dropped it to the ground and started humping it. I believe he may have seen a bit more than his parents thought he did. My son, 5 at the time, announced to everyone at a large dinner party that Daddy's member was long and hairy. Related, my wife works at a theme park where she gives princess makeovers to little girls. One morning she was working on a little girl and trying to make small talk with the child. "Do you have any pets, princess?" "We have a pony," the girl replied matter-of-factly. "Oh, lovely. What color's your pony?" The girl shrugged and replied, "Oh, I don't know. I've never seen it. But Daddy says Mommy can ride it any time she wants to." My wife had to bite her lip to keep her from laughing. My friend's kid asked, "Mummy, how old are you?" She said, 32. "Oh, well that's a good age to die, I suppose." My older stepsister sleptwalked a lot. When I was around 8 or so, I remember waking up lying on my back because I felt something brushing my face. It was her hair. She was leaning over me with her mouth open a little, just staring at me. It was the most terrifying thing I've ever woken up to. I was so scared, I just laid there staring back. Then she straightened back up and left the room. I started crying loudly and my dad found her peeing in the corner of the living room. That part was funny later, but it took a while before I'd sleep in the room with her again. I mean, that does sound absolutely horrifying. I do not want the ring girl appearing above me in my sleep, thank you very much. Nor to have to clean the carpet in the corner of the room she finished her exploits in. Ugh. My mum caught me whacking it to an adult movie and slowly backed out of the room. I caught her reflection in the TV, but she didn't know I saw her. She's never brought it up. Can't blame her, to be honest. A couple of years ago, I found something strange in my little brother's closet. He was about 8 at the time. You know those large Kool-Aid containers that store the powder? Well, he took an empty one from the recycling pile and filled it with a combination of tap water, acorns from our backyard, leaves, and I think even some bugs. When I found it, he'd opened it up after about 3 months, and it looked like some serious mildew had formed. We dumped it, and I found out he was trying to reincarnate one of the puppies my dog lost. I guess it didn't work. There was a girl I used to go to school with, and she told me a story about her sister once. Her sister had an easy bake oven and the family had some goldfish. One day, the sister decided to wake up extra early so she'd be able to make the family breakfast. Cute, right? Wrong. What she had planned for breakfast was goldfish a la easy bake. Her goldfish died under a light bulb. Rest in peace, goldfish. My daughter cut the heads off hers and hid them under her bed. She had been fishing with my dad and cleaning the fish afterwards, so at least there was a good explanation as to why she had done this. When I was about 5 or 6, I used to make my Barbies have adult competitions and be exotic dancers and stuff. I'm assuming that I saw this happen in movies because I have no idea where else I could have learned about it from, and I also knew the proper names for it, and more often than not, there'd be a huge backstory set up like a "What will happen next?" Pokemon cliffhanger. Like, Stacy is a single mother who needs to take off clothes for money at night and keeps having babies because of her parties. Tonight is the night of the big bedroom competition. Will she win? I'm going to keep my children away from adult movies and songs as much as possible until they're done with stuffed animals. This was me too. My Barbies were constantly doing the deed. Lots of soap opera-esque cheating, all that stuff. I'd put their faces in the crotches of other Barbies and make slurping noises. Also, once in Brownies, we were talking about what careers Cinderella might have had if she hadn't married Prince Charming. All the other girls were saying stuff like nurse or teacher, and I said working girl. My mom was the troop leader, and she was so embarrassed. A friend of mine went out for dinner with his family, which included a 4-year-old boy. Everyone was looking down at the menu to decide what to order. As the waitress approached the table, they all looked up and noticed the boy was standing in the booth with his pants down and both hands pointing at his prominently displayed member. In his best "Who da man" voice, he proclaimed, "Good morning, Mr. Johnson." Apparently, he had been waking up with a confusing situation, and this is what his parents said when he asked them about it. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Conversation I had with my daughter when she was 2. I said, "What do you want for breakfast, honey?" "Puppy." No, what? "Can I eat the baby?" What? She then proceeded to grab her doll and slam it in the oven. It wouldn't have been so bad if she hadn't screamed, "Shut up," when the doll started crying. Kids are messed up, man. I was going to babysit my friend's younger brother and sister, and the mum wanted me to come over for dinner so they could get to know me better. Before I left, the boy, who was 5, said loudly and cheerfully, completely out of the blue, "When I grow up, I want to beat my wife." His parents were genuinely confused and told him that was wrong. In the few years we were neighbors, I never saw any signs of a bad household, so who knows where he got that from. My parents waited until I was 18 to tell me that as a small toddler, I used to eat the frayed ends of the carpet. I once walked in and listened for a good 30 to 45 seconds of my 4-year-old daughter holding a long conversation where Barbie was leaving Ken because he was a deadbeat, and Ken was alternately pleading and threatening Barbie, complete with name-calling and accusations. Barbie sounded angry but calm. The depth of her understanding of the situation weirded me out. We don't let them watch Springer, and we parents had never fought like that, even in private. My parents did tell me, and they like to remind me every once in a while, telling me that I was always weird. Great. Anyway, I used to play with Barbies when I was 8 or 9 years old. I used to sometimes take their heads off, and other times take all their clothes off, tie their hands behind their backs, and make a sort of chain of Barbies that were hung by their heads. I don't know why I did it, and neither do they. I have no recollection of this, but I'd think it was creepy for my mother to find one day when going into my room. One day, my son, who was 10 at the time, his dad and I were driving home from his basketball game. And my son was telling his dad about this girl who'd thrown 2 basketballs in his face in the game the week before. When telling his dad about it, he described her as an ugly B-word. Before I could chastise him for the language or sentiment, his dad says, "Don't be like that. She could be your girlfriend one day." To which my son replies, "Yeah, then I'll be throwing balls at her face." One of those parental moments where you should be angry and punishing them, but you're just trying not to die laughing. When my mum called out my full name one time, you know that's not good. She'd told me she'd found something disgusting on the computer. Crap. So here's a pretty solid transcript. My mum said, "This is disgusting." I replied, "Mom, all teenage boys are looking at that stuff on the internet. Bob's dad even got him a magazine of it for his 14th birthday. Not like this. This is disgusting." "What did you find?" "You tell me." I'm not gonna do that. Just punish me." And that was it. A stalemate. I've consumed a very wide array of adult material, and I had no idea how badly I'd been busted, and figured correctly she wasn't going to fight like hell to go further down the rabbit hole. To this day, I have no idea what part of my messed up psyche that my mum busted me on. My son is 5. His aunt took him to the mall shopping last weekend. When he came home, he whispered to me, "I spied on my aunt when she was getting changed, and she has the hairiest hoo-ha I've ever seen." I'll be reminding him of that in approximately 10 years. My sister is stalking someone. Don't know who though, so I can't warn them. My son is 2.5, so we have many, many years of creepy ahead. But for now, the other day he was rolling around on the floor in the living room, doing these really weird-looking somersault things. "What you doing, bud?" "I'm trying to bite my eggplant." "Oh, well, be careful." Look, the narrator knows that stuff like this happens all the time with kids, and I'm talking about every kid. I know that it's normal, so why is recording this making me so apprehensive about ever having children? Hopefully it's not discouraging too many of you. I was visiting a friend, sitting in her kitchen chatting, when her 4-year-old boy came into the room crying. I mean really crying, like Santa and the Easter Bunny had just ganged up and beat the crap out of him crying. His face was beet red and tears were streaming down his face. We then noticed that he had his downstairs equipment clasped in his hands and he was squeezing it as hard as he possibly could. He sobbed, "Mom, it hurts when I do this." He continued to cry as his mum and I looked at each other in dumbstruck confusion. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity of crying and squeezing, his mum said, "Well, honey, then don't do that." Her son immediately stopped squeezing, paused for a moment, then smiled as he tucked himself away. "Thanks, Mom," he said as he skipped out of the room. One of my 2-year-old twin cousins came up to me one day, and I kid you not, she grabbed me by the downstairs area and pulled as hard as she could, as she yelled, "Naughty!" I was on medication for months after that. One day, I found out my son was getting bullied by 3 other boys. I was going to call the school about it, but my husband told me not to. I can only assume he told our son to fight them. The day after, my son came home from school all smiley. I asked him if the other kids were still giving him trouble, and he just laughed and said, "No, not anymore." Meanwhile, I saw my husband in the mirror. He had his arms crossed, and he was nodding, probably thinking, "Frick yeah, that's my boy." A few days passed, and I thought nothing of it. Then my son got a virus on his computer and asked me if he could use my personal laptop while my husband got rid of the virus. I told him sure and logged him in. He used it for a few hours until my husband got rid of the virus, then shut down the laptop and gave it back to me. Later that night, I decided to go on Facebook and I noticed my son forgot to log out of his account. I know I shouldn't snoop, but I was too tempted, so I looked at his messages. I saw he sent a message to the 3 boys that were bullying him, and I read it. The message was along the lines of, "Hey Chris, did you cry like a witch today because you saw your teeth on my necklace? If any of you screw with me, I'll be adding more teeth." Then he added a photo of this string with a bunch of teeth tied to it. His necklace, I assume. So I found out my son wears a tooth necklace to school. When I told my husband, he just laughed. Typical. Kinda weird, but more just a what the frick moment. I was babysitting this kid for my mum's friend. The kid, Tyler, was like 5 or 6. Anyway, I was chilling with him in the kitchen of this house, and it was pretty normal. All of a sudden, he says, "Have you ever seen anyone die before?" I was a little surprised and creeped out, but replied, "No?" Then Tyler looked at me with a creepy, wide-eyed stare and said, "Just wait." I was kind of frickin' hella freaked out, and Tyler got up and went to the cabinet and opened an airtight jar of peanuts, grabs a handful and starts scarfing them down, making eye contact with me. I looked at him and said, "What are you doing there, Tyler?" He looked at me with the same face and says, "My mom didn't tell you? I'm allergic to peanuts." Frickin' great. I drove him to the hospital and he got a shot and everything was alright. His mum said he'd never acted like that before and I'm pretty sure he's fine now. It was crazy though. In short, a kid asked if I'd ever seen anyone die before, then promptly ate a bunch of peanuts, which he was allergic to. When I was younger, I found a Dickie's barbecue cup of toenails, dryer lint, and hardened splooge in my brother's room. When I poured it out to see what it was, it fell out like a scratchy pale strawberry shortcake bar off the stick. I freaked out and left it there on the carpet. Later, he came in and asked me if I'd been in his room. When I asked why, he said, "Never mind. My dad paid me $50 to help recarpet that room." My brother blew his nose on a piece of lunch meat and then ate it. Little boys can be disgusting. I used to babysit these 2 boys when I was 12. They were 5 and 6, one fat, one skinny. Now, normally it's unheard of for a male to babysit kids, but my sister started out babysitting them, and eventually she no longer could, and the mother asked me if I wanted to. They were a very wealthy family that spoiled their kids to the point where they were rotten little jerks. The parents were just horrible at being parents, which is probably why they asked me to babysit without hesitation. Anyways, one day we were in the toy room playing Nintendo 64 and they wanted a different game. So I searched the room for another cartridge and I found my way into the drawer which contained Polaroids of the fat one's downstairs area. Being 12, I didn't realize the possible severity of the situation and I shrugged it off. Well, after I left, apparently the kid had mentioned to their mother that I'd found the pictures. The next time I babysat, the mother casually brought it up and told me they'd taken the pictures for medical purposes, as the fat one had a rash they were keeping an eye on. I babysat a kid who drowned animals, a duckling and 2 baby chickens to be exact, in the backyard pond, to watch the bubbles. His mother told me that, and she wasn't disturbed at all, but seemed to be bragging about his curiosity. I nearly threw up. He wanted to be a cop when he grew up. I had a lot to say about it, and then I wasn't asked to babysit anymore. It happened back when the movie Superbad came out. I was in my room drawing like I usually did. As I was brainstorming ideas, the scene where Jonah Hill drew Johnsons all day came to mind. I wanted to create my own eggplant art, so I drew the biggest, ugliest one I could. It was horribly graphic, and I remember being disgusted with myself, so I folded it up and left it on my desk. I left for the day, and when I came home, it was no longer there. My heart sank. I was on full panic mode. Where the frick is it? I frantically searched everywhere, but I couldn't just ask, "Hey Dad, where's my giant downstairs elephant drawing? I grew up in a Mormon household for God's sake. Nobody ever mentioned it." I was running late coming home from work one day by a few hours. My wife couldn't get a hold of me and was beginning to worry. Then my 3-year-old son went to the window and said, "I see Daddy in the car." My wife went to the window and no one was there. When my wife asked him where I was, he responded, "He's a ghost," then smiled and walked away. In short, my son told my wife that I was dead and that he could see my ghost. What's the dumbest thing you did as a child out of curiosity? I just wanted to see if my tongue could actually get stuck to ice like in cartoons. My dad found me crouching with my tongue glued to the bottom shelf of the freezer. I think a bit of my tongue was left on that shelf after I pulled myself away. When I was 5, I tried to see if I could fit my head through the bars going up the stairs. I got my head in, but couldn't get back out. My mum called the fire department, they pried me out and gave me a teddy bear. In short, I told all my friends how to get a free teddy bear. I stuck a fork in a light socket to see if it would actually shock me. It did. My friend was trying to stick a paperclip in an electrical outlet during class. He only put it in one socket. It did nothing. Well, I was smart enough at the age of 10 to tell him that he needs to stick both ends of the paperclip in both holes for it to work, and oh boy did he get results. He cried, I laughed, the teacher was angry, and now I'm an electrical engineer working for GE Aviation. I was left alone in the car for a few minutes. I loosened the handbrake while the car was located on a hill. My grandpa had to run for the car and make it stop. If it makes you feel any better, once I pressed the cigarette lighter of my dad's car into my thumb to see how hot it was. The answer was pretty frickin' hot. I stole something small out of a store to see what kind of trouble I'd get into. Turns out I was young enough for them to simply tell me to leave. I stole a lychee from this grocery store and my dad caught me on our way home. He made me return it and apologize. I cried a lot. It was all very dramatic. Cringe. I poured water down a hive of wasps when I was 6. I thought they looked thirsty because the water droplets I gave them around the entrance all got sucked up. Turns out they were just trying to keep their home free of moisture. My grandfather, who was gardening at the time, saw the cloud that came up, grabbed me and ran inside. I still got stung more than 10 times though. My sister, who was a year younger, had been watching me. She went inside and closed the door the moment I poured the cup. She's much smarter than I am. She still remembers the way the wasps slammed against the door trying to follow us in. Yeah, this feels like the kind of thing the narrator would have told one of his younger siblings to do and then watched from behind a pane of glass. I was not a very good child or brother. I sat on train tracks, seeing if I'd be fast enough to dodge the train. After 30 minutes, I got bored though. My short attention span might have saved my life. I smashed one of my fingers with a rubber mallet just to see what would happen. Pain happened. Oh, the classic. I stuck my head through the banister on the stairs. I got stuck and was stuck there until my uncle woke up from his nap and saw me while he was walking down the stairs. If he wasn't an athlete, I don't think he would have been able to pull the metal rods apart the way he did. And of course, I told my mum, well, I got my head through, so I thought I could get it out. Stomped on a cactus barefoot because my cousin told me it was a time machine and that's how it worked. It was not a time machine. I ate a cigarette as a kid because I didn't understand the concept of smoking, but I regularly saw my dad putting cigarettes in his mouth. So, one time when he was in another room, he had his pack on the coffee table and, well, I was hungry. I ate some ants because I saw Baloo the bear do it in the Jungle Book. I donned black face paint because of some older cartoons. I was 5. The family friends I did it for were black. Plus, they liked my impression of those racist crows that appeared in a bunch of Disney movies. I tried jumping over a waist-high fence. It should have been easy. Went for the jump, made it over, but in the process I kneed myself in the face and knocked myself out. I don't know how long I was out for. I rubbed deep heat all over my Johnson. Then I went downstairs and sat at the family dining table to eat dinner. I ate my dinner very quickly that day. I tried to change the TV channel remotely with a butter knife. I must have been sitting on the real remote when I picked up the knife and the channel changed. I was convinced it was some kind of crazy electronic interference I didn't understand, so I tried and tried to change the channel again with the knife. I thought if I concentrated really hard, it would work. It did not. Well, I petted a dead rotting rat, but it was out of love. I started messing around with a deer's skeleton I found. I'd never seen bones so big that you were allowed to touch, and I wanted to bring it home and make my room into a museum. Unfortunately, my mum didn't appreciate me walking into the house with a dead deer's leg. I sharpened my pinky finger using a pencil sharpener, and oh boy, blood was everywhere, I can tell you. We were having a penny race on my friend's parents' hallway wall, pressing a penny flat against the wallpaper and running it across the wall with a finger. My penny slipped and fell directly behind the little plug in the nightlight, onto the prongs. The lights in the entire house flickered and went dark. Blue electricity spidered up the wallpaper and my friend unplugged the nightlight. The lights came back on and where the electricity had been was burnt black wallpaper in the same design. They were grounded and I couldn't come over to their place for weeks. Grounded, pun intended or no? When I was a kid, I liked to put coins in my mouth. Like a lot of children, I liked the metallic taste. My mother would always stop me when she caught me doing it. One night, I was basically home alone, and my mum was at work and my dad was asleep as he worked the night shift. I was in my bedroom and put a quarter in my mouth. The quarter fell directly over my windpipe and I started to choke. I remember being scared because I couldn't breathe. I wasn't sure if I could make it to my dad's room to wake him up, and I was thinking Mum was right. At the last second, as the lights were starting to dim, my gag reflex finally kicked in and I coughed up the quarter. I sat there looking at it, and I vowed from that day forward I'd never put coins in my mouth again. I didn't tell my mum about that for years. I believed that everything that was red tasted like strawberries. I found out that I was wrong after I ate some red wool. I was maybe 5, so I was making instant ramen for myself for the first time without my mum's supervision. I love fire, so I thought maybe it would be cool to play with the Shin Ramyun plastic paper and the fire from my stove. I knew the sink was nearby just in case. The plastic got lit on fire and I was about to bring it to the sink to watch it burn when it drops onto the floor. I sang happy birthday to the small fire on the floor, and it didn't go out until my mum appeared shortly after and doused it with a bowl of water. The floor ended up having burn marks until we remodeled it when I was 12. I put my whole hand on a stove to see how hot it got. Turned out it got really, really hot. Well, I like milk and I like Coke, so let's make some magic. Cue me vomiting for the next 10 minutes. Oh my god, you brought back a memory. I did this too, but with milk and orange juice because I thought it would make an orange milkshake. Ugh. You know, I'd heard that if you stuck a knife in the toaster, it would explode or something, so one day I decided to try it. I touched the top of the toast, not the metal, and scraped it around a bit on the crust, and nothing happened. So I tried again and again and again. So for a couple of months after that, I'd use that method to see how toasted the bread was. I stopped after I saw my dad pull the lever up manually, causing the toast to kind of fly up in the air, you know? I thought, well, that looks cool as hell, so I switched to that method. That was way more fun because I was obsessed with how high up in the air I could make the toast go. And if I caught both pieces before they hit the ground, I won. So basically, I spent a couple of months playing Operation with my own life on the line. I'm not sure I deserved to be that insanely lucky. This video is making the narrator concerned about just how many common sense things he'll have to explain to his offspring growing up, and which ones he'll miss, causing a catastrophe. Kids really are just on a main quest for self-deletion right up until they level up, aren't they? You know those firecrackers that have strings on both ends and you pull them in the opposite direction at the same time and it makes the thing in the middle explode? I loved those as a kid, and I was playing with them outside one day when I suddenly had the bright idea that I could prank the mailman with one of them. So I tied it through our mailbox and made sure it was secure, and then tried it by opening the mailbox. Sure enough, it worked and the thing exploded and I thought it was amazing. So I set it up again and then I waited. I should include that I was curious if it would work, and then upon knowing it would work, curious to see the reaction of the mailman because I was under the impression it would be hilarious. It was not. He came around the same time every day, and I even knew his name by then, so when I saw him coming down the street, I ran inside and hid by peeking out the front window blinds. He walked up to our porch, went to open the mailbox, and stopped. I saw him inspect the mailbox, then back away slowly and just walk away. Before I even had the chance to go outside and figure out what had happened, I assumed it didn't work or he just didn't have any mail for us that day, a cop car came screeching down our street and stopped in front of my house, and an officer ran up to our door and started pounding. I was scared as all heck, but it was a cop, so I opened the door, and the cop pulls me outside and asks me what in the heck is going on, while pointing at the mailbox. I try as best as I can to explain myself and repeatedly mention, "It's a firecracker! It's a firecracker!" As I was freaking out and on the verge of tears, the mailman shows back up and he and the cop full-on verbally berate me, saying, "Stuff like this is not funny. It looks like it was wired up like a bomb. Tampering with mailboxes is a federal offense. You're lucky you're just a little kid or you'd be going to prison." They then forced me to open the mailbox and set the firecracker off, but by then I was so traumatized and upset that I did it as slowly as possible, which somehow prevented the firecracker going off as one of the strings just slipped out of it. The cop and the mailman then left and I untied the rest of the firecracker from the mailbox and then went back inside and hid in shame. The mailman was never once friendly to me again after that, and I've lived with the shame of it ever since. I cut the power cord of a fan with a pair of scissors. There was a flash and next thing I knew, I was in the hospital. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I was a kid, my family would go on camping trips during the summer. My dad always bought a big kerosene lamp which was very bright, but it would heat up enough to burn flesh on contact. My dad told me so many times not to touch that lamp. I touched the lamp. My dad sat in silence across the campsite and watched me. I turned pale, started sweating, put on my best poker face. "Dad, you remember how you told me not to touch the lamp?" I fell asleep that night with my fingers in a cup of ice. This is one of Dad's funniest memories. I once touched the spinning blade from the food processor with the tip of my nail to see how fast it was spinning. Luckily, I only lost the tip of my nail and not my finger. No idea what I was thinking. I tried inhaling small stones and got them stuck in my nose for quite some time. It got really serious, and I needed an ENT doctor to remove it. I let my friend punch me in the face once, just to see what it was like to get punched in the face. I ate a leaf off the ground because I was wondering why we eat lettuce but not other leaves. Well, I figured that one out pretty quickly. I ran my thumb along my dad's shaving razor just to see if it would cut me. Surprise, surprise, it did, and I regretted my decision immediately. My family and I were on holiday, and the hotel we were staying at had a glass stovetop, completely different to the old-fashioned one we had at home. I figured it couldn't get that hot since it wasn't metal. So to test this theory, I parted my ponytail and plonked half of it on the stove while it was on. In a few seconds, I'd burnt the bottom section of the part I put on the stove. I was horrified, and so was my mum when she saw what I'd done. Later that week, my mum and I went to the hotel pool. She specifically told me not to go into the water without her. So I did the exact opposite when she wasn't looking. It was one of those pools with concrete steps, with the last step being more of a leap. I jumped straight onto the last step and nearly drowned. My mum is deaf and had her back turned while she was setting a nearby table up, so she didn't hear me splutter and scream when my head was above water. It was the scariest thing ever. I thought I was going to die right there and then. At one point, I blacked out for a few seconds and thought about my family and how they'd feel if I was no longer alive. I don't know how, but I mustered up the strength to eventually wrench myself out of the pool. Filled the locks on my parents' cars with twigs so they couldn't go anywhere. They wouldn't take me to the park, so I wouldn't let them go anywhere. It cost them a pretty penny to get them all out as well. I wanted to know what it felt like if you stood on your bed and jumped off it, landing on your knees without landing on your feet first. It felt like I broke both of my legs. I was a pretty stupid 8-year-old. I drank an entire bottle of cough medicine because I wanted to know if it would do me in. I was a 30-pound tiny kid and Benadryl made me pass out for an entire day. My parents still don't know, and when I passed out, I was sure I was done. My brother told my sister that chewable children's Tylenol was candy and gave her a whole bottle. Luckily, our neighbor had Ipecac. Plugged in a wet extension cord to a wet extension outlet. Shot the power to the house and almost electrocuted myself. Used a metal kebab skewer to touch the pilot spark on the kitchen hob. The shock was great enough that I thought my friend next to me had punched me really hard in the shoulder. I turned and had a go at him. Shortly after, I realized I'd just shocked myself. Me and my friend grabbed garbage bags and climbed up on the roof to jump off and see if they'd work as parachutes. They didn't, but I think it's because we needed more height. Cartoons have a lot to answer for with regards to our perception of physics in the world growing up. They show you that literally any sheet of anything other than paper can be used with the same degree of success as a specially made parachute. The other regular experiment for the narrator was being certain that any similar fabric stretched out would serve as an amazing trampoline. I broke so many towels and bedsheets. Sorry, Mum. I touched one of the cigarette lighters found in cars after pushing it in several times and thinking it wasn't working to find out what the coils feel like. Well, they feel hot. I'm 32 and I did this the other day. A joker of an airline hostess said to keep all baggage and children under the seat in front of you. My parents are jerks, so I climbed under a chair in the plane. My uncle, who lived with my grandparents, has a tobacco addiction. He used to keep bundles of it in his room's bedside drawer and chew on it all the time. I, a 10-year-old girl, was very fascinated by it somehow and wanted to look cool chewing tobacco. When no one was in the room, I snuck in, took a bundle and emptied it into my mouth. Now, of course, 10-year-old me didn't know that the tobacco juice should be spat out and not swallowed. So I swallowed the whole thing after chewing it for some time. A few minutes later, the effects kicked in and my head started spinning so bad. I ran to the living room couch and crashed. I lay there for the rest of the day. I couldn't even lift my head up without feeling like throwing up and giddy. My dad and grandmother thought I was unwell and were very concerned. They didn't know what this little brat had done to herself. My grandma suggested to eat something after a few hours and brought me rice and yogurt, Indian comfort food for sick people. I somehow managed to eat it while still feeling like crap. Suddenly, my stomach started churning and I felt the yogurt and rice making its way up. I ran to the washroom and emptied my insides. In the end, a glob of tobacco also came up. I felt much better afterwards. My parents still don't know about it, and my grandmother passed away a few years back, so she never will. I was a teen, but I shot myself through the foot with a homemade blowgun to see if it could pierce flesh. It went all the way through. I glued the tips of my thumb and index finger with superglue. I glued my hands together on purpose with superglue once. I'd used to do that with white glue for fun, to remove the dry glue like a snakeskin or something. And this one time, my mum was using superglue to fix something, and I decided to try it. After a minute, when I tried to pull my hands apart and couldn't do it, I went crying to my mum. I was about 6 and kind of a crybaby. She freaked out, started to cry too, and spent the next couple of hours using a ruler and warm and hot water to separate my hands. After that, I wasn't really interested in playing with any kind of glue for a while. I had a very large, heavy head when I was younger. We went on a hiking holiday and were walking across a beach with rock pools. Me, being the curious child I was, knelt down beside a pool and looked over to see what I could find. Next thing you know, my giant head overbalanced my 6-year-old body and I slid headfirst into the pool. Luckily, my dad came and pulled me out before I drowned and wrapped me up in spare clothes. I saw some interesting sea life while I was under there, though. It certainly satisfied my curiosity. Well, here's the list of my misdeeds and their consequences. I pulled the fire alarm in my school. It went off. The fire truck came. I put my finger in a wasp nest and got stung by a wasp. I tried to shave with my father's razor, and I cut my face. I touched a hot stove and burned my finger. And I should mention at the end that I graduated from an Ivy League university. So there's hope for you dumb kids. I was a really dumb and kinda curious child, so I regularly searched up for the youngest anime girls I could using my grandma's cell phone. I put all sorts of viruses on the damned thing, and she's probably on a list now. Sorry, Grandma. I drank fabric softener when I was 7, thinking that it would give me magic powers. I had to go to A&E and have my stomach pumped and drink charcoal. Another time I drank Head and Shoulders, thinking it would give me magic powers. It resulted in yet another trip to the hospital and yet another charcoal drink. Look guys, I really wanted magic powers. So you know that kitchen appliance which is essentially a handheld blender? Well, in all of my immense wisdom, I thought it would be a good idea to stick my thumb in and press the button. I can't say it ended well for 2-year-old me. I fell through the ice. I'd wondered if it was thick enough yet, and it wasn't. When I was younger, me and my parents were at the zoo. We'd been wandering around for an hour, and then we came across this empty enclosure. My parents decided to screw with me and say that there was an invisible snake in the enclosure, and you could tell because the grass was moving. Of course, my dumb idiot butt believed this, not understanding that it was the wind. My parents said they'd adopt it for me. So of course, I then went to school on Monday telling everyone I'd adopted an invisible snake. I used a spray-on deodorant as a flamethrower to see if the rumors were true that it would work. It did. I could have caused all kinds of damage to property or myself. Made a chlorine bomb to see if the rumors were true that it would work, and it did. Again, I could have caused all kinds of damage to property or myself. I used matches to make mini rockets to see if the rumors were true that it would work, and it did. I could have caused all kinds of damage to property or myself. Made a papier-mâché volcano and burnt paper inside to see if it would work. It did. I ended up with a burnt circle of carpet under my bed and a very sore butt. I tasted mud because it looked like chocolate. I put aftershave on my ball bag when I was young. I don't know why. All I remember is burning and screaming. You know, I must have been really little. I was standing indoors next to a huge potted plant. There was this round thing sitting on the dirt in the pot, like a mushroom or conker. In hindsight, it was likely some sort of mushroom. Well, I picked it up, sniffed it, and it smelt okay, so I bit it. It tasted weird, and I thought maybe it was a seed or something, so I put it back and got a drink. I looked up what was in gunpowder in the World Book Encyclopedia. I went to 2 different pharmacies to get the nitrate and sulfur, ground up some charcoal to get carbon, made a giant firecracker out of a toilet paper tube and masking tape, fashioned a wick from toilet paper and gunpowder. I placed it in the fork between 2 branches on my dad's only and favorite peach tree, finally taking hold after a few tough Michigan winters. I lit the wick and ran to the garage for safety. I watched it go off. Big boom. Big flame. Split the peach tree right up the middle. Dad was very sad, but said he was glad I didn't blow myself up by accident. Eventually it healed, but it never thrived. It bore an occasional peach. I was about 12. This was 63 years ago, by the way. When did you make an epic escape from a terrible situation? I was out in the bluff country of the upper Mississippi with my dog in the early winter. I was at the base of a cliff and came across a hole about 10 inches across that had some moist, warm air coming out. I cave sometimes, and I got excited at the prospect of finding a new, potentially live one. Took my dog home and came back the next day with a helmet, headlamp, and some general caving gear. After kicking out the entrance so it was wide enough for me to crawl in, I proceeded through sort of an upward crawl space, about 1 or 2 feet tall. About 6 feet in, it opened up into a small chamber, and when I shined my headlamp across the floor, it was covered in tiny glints. They were the eyes of rattlesnakes, and I mean hundreds of rattlesnakes. I'd stumbled across one of their winter dens. I slowly backed out and got the whole F out of there. In short, I thought I found a new live cave, came across a rattlesnake hibernation den. Went to Ocean City, Maryland, and there was a full rising moon in the east. I wanted to see it, so I set my alarm for 1 a.m. to watch it over the ocean. You know, that time of year from when the heat, where the moon looks about 6 times as big as it is when it rises, it's blood red. Well, really dark orange anyway. I should have taken that as an omen. As I was walking, I heard a muffled scream or something from behind one of the umbrella boxes or changing stations. I snuck up and some guys were trying to commit the unspeakable act on some girl. I thought it was animals fighting. I had no idea what I'd started to see. Then I heard someone say, "Shut up or we're gonna cut you." One of them had his pants down and she was struggling between the 2 other guys. I don't know why I did it, but I picked up what I guess was a piece of the post fencing and I started beating the crap out of the guys. Since I was quiet because of the sand and it was all to the heads and I was wearing dark colors, I guess I had them by surprise. A whack to each of their heads, so hard that nobody even gave an alert as to what was happening, just falling over. 1, 2, 3, all of them fell down. I was actually scared I'd killed one of them or something, but he was moaning. The girl looked up at me and I said, "Come on, we've got to run now." And we did, as they were getting up. I guess they did because they sounded pretty angry, but I knew I really hit the F out of the first guy. We sprinted as hard as we could on the sand and jumped a fence and rattled some doors and ran into someone who woke up and called the police. Her father thanked me. She told me that they had a gat, or she said they did. She never saw one, just the knife. Turns out her dad was some Muslim priest and she and him had gotten into an argument, so she'd walked off to cool down a bit. Her dad went the other way down the beach to look for her, and then she ran into those drunk college kids. In short, snuck up and beat up some guys trying to commit the unspeakable act on a girl and then booked it out of there faster than lightning. I'm lucky I lived. Well done, and congratulations on finding maybe the best feasible situation where someone can actually sneak up and take on 3 other guys. Most stories of one person taking on multiple assailants, even if that person has like a black belt or something, just don't go very well. Hope the girl was alright. 2001. After just having discovered that my then-wife was having an affair, I decided I need to get out of town for a while to clear my head. The next day, I was on a flight to LA to spend some time with my best friends from high school who'd moved there years prior. What transpired was 2 weeks of insane amounts of drinking and at least one failed trip to drive up to Vegas in the middle of the night. On the night before I had to head back to face the reality of the situation, my friends had concluded that the best remedy for me was to get me into bed with someone else before heading home. After much alcohol consumption, we headed to a club in downtown LA where my friend had heard a person could get special treatment for the right amount of money. To this day, I don't know if it was a nightclub or a joint where women take their clothes off for money, because we never made it past the bouncer at the front door. He turned us away because he could tell how drunk we already were. On the way back to my friend's car, we were approached by a homeless man who was looking for a handout. Instead of giving him some money for one, my friends asked him if he knew of a place where we could go to find female companionship. The man obliged and proceeded to lead us around the corner to a very shady apartment building in what turned out to be a very shady part of town. When we arrived at that building, the homeless man buzzed one of the apartments, and several minutes later, a man appeared at the door who was the spitting image of Eazy-E. For all I know, it was Eazy-E. After whispering with the homeless man, Eazy-E gave each of us a very judging look over and without saying a word nodded for us to follow him. What followed next could sound like it was coming straight from some bad comedy flick or a stereotypical gang flick. 3 white guys climbing up 4 flights of stairs in what was clearly either the worst apartment complex in LA, a straight-up smack house, or both. Around the time we reached the top floor, the combination of fear and adrenaline began to rapidly cleanse my system of all the booze. At this point, we were instructed to wait at the top of the stairs while Eazy-E went down the hall and into one of the apartments. By now, I was completely sober and I began to desperately try and get my friend's attention. Psst, psst, let's get the frick out of here. My friends either couldn't hear me or were too engrossed in seeing what was going to happen next, so neither of them really acknowledged me. I was beginning to really freak out and I slowly began inching my way back to the stairwell, and that is when it happened. All of a sudden, this woman emerged from the apartment down the hall. She was the spitting image of a stereotypical ghetto woman, about 300 pounds, fake hair, long fake nails, giant hoop earrings, wearing nothing but a sports support and biker shorts, both of which were stretched to the max. She sauntered up to our little group, looked over all of us, and in a loud voice announced, "Who wants some of this?" I'm not sure what exactly happened next, but all I remember was running. Before I knew it, I was outside on the street, running back to where I thought our car was. I took a second to look back to see both of my friends chasing behind me, with the homeless man chasing behind them. Luckily, I found our car, and we all jumped in and got the frick out of there as fast as was humanely possible. In short, who wants to get some of this? It was my late junior year of high school, and I was at another school's house party. It was all going pretty well, except there was a lot of people in the backyard. Eventually, one of the neighbors that was family friends came over. It was a husband and wife, both in their 40s, in full-on suburban warfare mood. Put the ganja and alcohol down, we called the cops, they're on our way. At the time, I was on probation for a minor possession charge, so all I needed to hear was cops and I was gone. I left through the front of the house, running like the devil himself was chasing me. I was out of the house, down the street, and in my car before anybody else had even moved. I brought my car back to the house to get my friends, but these people were blocking the backyard entrance. Impatient and nervous, I do the honors. F these people, they can't make you stay, let's get the F out of here. At that moment, one of my friends I came with, who was being blocked by the neighbor, decided he'd had enough. All I saw was him come flying through the backyard entrance and knock the silly out of the guy blocking the exit. That opened the floodgates. In about 15 seconds, the house was cleared. I was pulling away as the kid who owned the house decides to say, "Screw it," and bailed. I gave him a fighting chance and popped my trunk. At the time, I had an old Ford Explorer. He jumped into the trunk, slammed the door behind him, and screams, "Go, go, go!" And we were gone. A few years ago, some friends and I were out drinking in downtown Toronto where we all live. We were in a cab going from one bar to another to meet some friends. As the cab driver pulls up to our destination, my friend, who's sitting in the driver's side back seat, opens his door just as a streetcar, sort of like a mini train for public transit like they have in San Francisco, was going by. The front corner of the streetcar takes the cab door clean off its hinges. The cab driver and streetcar driver both get out and start screaming at each other. No one seems to realize it was actually my friend's fault, so we drop the cab fare plus a generous tip into the driver's seat and quietly exit through the opposite side. I mean, even though you gave him some money, I can't say that you're a great person for this, although I don't know who would come out on top of an insurance fight in this particular case, since you buggered off. I hope the taxi driver didn't get stuck with the bill or thousands for the repair. Oof. In 2005, I was traveling in China after taking a year off after high school. I'd already been all over Japan, Australia, Southeast Asia, and China was the last place I was visiting before coming home. I flew into Beijing and decided to spend about a week there before heading on. So it's about 3 days in and I'm walking through Tiananmen Square on my way somewhere when these two Asian girls ask me to hold a camera and get a picture. Now, something you have to know is that there is, or at least there was this thing where Chinese girls or sometimes guys would come up to tourists and try and get them to go with them to some phony art exhibit or something and pressure them to buy some overpriced piece of crap. I'd seen this kind of thing before and just stayed clear. But this time the same red flags weren't going off. One of the girls spoke near-perfect English and the other girl's was passable. And after a minute or two of chatting, there was no mention of any of the usual scam stuff, so I figured they must be legit. We continued chatting and eventually wandered around the area for a bit. Then, after about an hour, one of the girls suggested that we go to a karaoke place. Karaoke was pretty popular across Asia at the time, but it isn't done like karaoke is in North America. In Japan, at least, you rent a small room with a karaoke machine. The price of the room included a few drinks, but you could also order more from a menu. So we got to this place, and then the red flags start going off. First thing I see when we get to it is that it's some kind of restaurant. But although it's the middle of the dinner rush, it's completely empty, save for a couple of guys in cheap suits, sitting around a table not eating or drinking. Keep in mind that this is less than a dozen blocks from the Forbidden Palace, so you'd think it would be a little more crowded. Frick, I think. Then we get led into a back room with a big banquet table and one tiny TV with the world's crappiest karaoke machine hooked up to it, and I got handed this drink menu, where the prices are crazy high, like high enough to include things besides drinks. So I start thinking that chances are pretty good that this is a place for working girls, and chances are also pretty good that if I don't buy anything I'm going to be robbed and forced to empty my debit card. Luckily, I keep a cool head and start to think of ways out of there. Fortunately, on the way into this back room to the door, the bathroom was open and I could see that there was a window big enough for me to fit through that was cracked open. I was sitting there 98% sure that I was about to be robbed and decided that the bathroom is the best bet out of there. So I say I have to use the bathroom, leave enough money to cover the one drink that I ordered, it was the cheapest thing on the menu, and surreptitiously grab my backpack and head to the washroom. I then proceed to throw my bag out through the window and squeeze myself through after it. After that, I took off running as fast as I could and caught the first cab that I could see half a block down and sweated bullets all the way back to my hostel. I found out later that something similar happened to a friend of mine who was traveling in Turkey. He met a fellow backpacker who suggested that they go out for a drink, and when they got there, the drinks were way overpriced. Turns out that the different drinks were covers for different types of bedroom acts with working girls, which apparently the other guy knew but neglected to mention. When my friend realized this, he tried to leave but was held up by a couple of guys and forced to withdraw as much as he could from an ATM. He ended up having to have his parents wire him money so that he could get home. In short, escaped from being robbed in a foreign country by diving out of a bathroom window. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. There is a racial slur that begins with N. We've replaced it with the word jigger in the 2 times it appears in this story. Anyways, some friends and I left a club in Boston one night and were pretty well lubricated by then. Two of my friends were running down the middle of the road looking for an open cab when one of them stops at a minivan and taps on the passenger side window. In the van were four large black guys, which my friend slurringly asked to give us a ride. The guy in the passenger seat responded with, "Yeah, but we roll hard. You roll hard?" At this point, my friend screams to me, "Yo, it's cool. My jiggers are going to give us a ride." At that point, I decided it was time to leave, so I grabbed my friend and told him to keep walking, but he yelled, "But I want to do some smack with my jiggers." Then I decided it was really time to leave. When I was 16, I was at the mall with a friend of mine who was telling me horrible, horrible stories about her friend. We turned a corner just as I exclaimed, "That's disgusting," really, really loudly. All 100 pounds of me suddenly noticed a very tall, very overweight man sitting on a bench with his equally overweight child attached to one of those leashes they used to have for kids. Well, he looks me right in the eye and says, "What's disgusting, huh?" and proceeds to stand up and come menacingly at me. I tried to explain that it was the story my friend was talking about, but he was having none of it. I booked it out of there really quickly and still felt really badly about the whole situation, as I could only imagine what he thought I'd been talking about. I was out for drinks with a friend of mine and a guy from work. The guy from work had a hard time controlling his drinking, so by the time we got to the sake place, I told him he was cut off. He was falling over at this point. At one point, he goes to the bathroom, and when he comes back, he's clutching his hand for some reason. I'm like, "Mike, what happened to your hand?" And he answered, I hurt it somehow. I might have broken the sink too." Oh crap. I like this place. Cheap beer, sake, and appetizers. So I go to check the bathroom. No damage. Phew. This place is one of those tiny Asian restaurants with two one-person bathrooms, male and female. I sit back down and said, "Mike, guy's room looks fine. Maybe you damaged the faucet somehow." His answer was, "Oh, no. I was in the girls' room." So I check the girls' bathroom. Devastation. Apparently he slipped on the wet floor, caught himself on the sink, and ripped this entire beautiful porcelain sink off the wall. It was the kind where water runs around in circles before it gets to your hands. All that's left is a glued-on cross-section of a sink on the wall and a pile of porcelain pieces on the floor with a metal faucet sticking up out of them. As a bonus, there was blood everywhere. Even the toilet looks pink. In the words of my friend, it looked like New York City was less one working girl that night. Apparently, he cut his hand on the sink and it sprayed everywhere as he fell. I tended to Mike's hand while my other friend started discreetly mopping up the blood trail that leads from the girls' room to our table with his shoes. A pile of blood is forming under Mike. Meantime, the owners realize what's happening, and upon seeing this disaster, what do? Nothing. They pretend nothing happened. No cops, just mops. I immediately demand the check, citing as my reason for leaving that I no longer feel well, which was half true by that point. I did not return to my favorite sake bomb place for months. In short, drunken coworker destroys public bathroom, creating a bloody mess, and I discreetly exit. This is not what most of us mean when we warn our friends that we're going to destroy their bathrooms. Such a wild thing to be on everyone's mind in the break room the next Monday. This is why we only drink with colleagues at our own peril. When I was a dumb preteen kid, a friend and I were screwing around and decided it would be fun to throw eggs at cars. We positioned ourselves at the end of an alley that dead-ended on a small hill that overlooked a fairly busy street, but didn't connect to it. We figured it was the perfect spot, because we were higher up than the streets, and a car couldn't get to us without going around the block. Plus, there weren't any streetlights nearby. After hitting a few cars with eggs, we truly unleashed on one car. A couple of eggs in each hand. We'd probably hit that windshield with 4 or 5 eggs at once. That's when the red and blue lights on the roof of that car came on. Because there were no streetlights nearby, we didn't realize it was a frickin' cop car. We hauled butt while the cop car sped around the block trying to get to our alley. Luckily, my buddy's house was just down said alley, and we ducked inside before the cop found us. He circled the neighborhood for half an hour, shining his spotlight into yards. In short, don't throw eggs at cop cars. My friend and I were on our way to a different town for some drinks with a friend of ours. It's a drive, probably like 45 minutes. Anyway, we were passing a big old roll of Mary J back and forth by the time we hit the city limits, and pulled up next to this guy driving an old RWD V8. You know the one I'm talking about. Brown, rust spots, big engine that's not quite in tune, but when you put it down, the tires on the thing will still scream. It's about 11 p.m. and we're parked at a four-way with woods behind us, and the town is in front of us, with 2 streets sitting perpendicular to us. Anyway, he looked over at us and revs the engine. I'm driving a Jeep, so I tap the gas and jokingly nod over at him like we're going to do this thing. Stoplight turns green and he hits it hard. I stay parked and just watch him with my mouth open and the number still in my hand. The guy starts fishtailing all over the road, goes really far right, overcorrects, left past the double yellow line, almost hits another car which swerves out of his way, overcorrects back over the double yellow line really hard, jumps the curb on the right side of the street and plows directly into a storefront's giant plate glass window. Glass just showered all over that car. The guy throws the car in reverse, sprayed landscaped bushes all over the inside of the building he had inadvertently entered, backs up into a street sign, then burns out down the road. The car that had swerved to avoid him whips a U-turn and chases after him as well. By then, the light had turned red, and I turned to my friend and honestly asked him if I'd hallucinated the entire thing. He said, no, that definitely happened. When we left our buddies at about 3 a.m., there were cops everywhere, taping off the building and digging around in the bushes. I thought about stopping them and telling them what happened, but I just decided it wasn't worth possibly getting arrested. A young 16-year-old me invited to a house party in a nearby town. A nice place, but the party was populated by a bit more of an alternative crowd than the younger me had grown up with. There was a band playing terrible music in the living room, kids hitting up pipes in the host's mother's bedroom, nowhere near enough room for all the folk that had decided that this was the place to be that Friday evening. Eventually, it all spilled out into the streets. A friend who'd accompanied me that night was spotted being led by one of the local emo-looking girls out onto the field across from the house. He was a perennial geek amongst geeks, this guy. This was just not his style, but he liked her, so we left him to it. We all knew he was about to get lucky, and we were happy for him, albeit in a field in northwest of England. Ah, what a place to lose it. Bless him. After the fact, we all met up again upstairs, passing around a big old spliff and high-fiving. The next thing we know, music is off, folk are shouting, and footsteps are getting louder. Lots of them. It turned out the girl was supposed to be with the lead singer of the band, who in turn happened to be the host. And one of her friends had decided that she was being just a little bit too much of a working girl. Door swings open, we drop the devil's lettuce to the deck, and all turn in shock as a long-haired, greasy black metal fan attempts to decimate each of us with his Ibanez. We pushed him to the ground, barged our way down the stairs and out the front door. Having thought we were clear of danger now, we call a taxi to pick us up. Having been quiet for about 5 minutes, we decide everything is fine. Close call. In actual fact, the offended vocalist had spent his 5 minutes getting troops and a hunting pack together in a fashion I find reminiscent of Age of Empires army building. They spotted us walking down the road and decided to make chase. We spotted our taxi and decided to make haste. We made it, just in time, safe in the taxi with the locks on the door. The taxi driver saw my lips move but couldn't make out what I was saying over all the banging on the windows. But he eventually clicked on. In that moment, I was Jack frickin' Bauer screaming, "Get us the frick out of here!" When I was 19, a couple of friends and I decided to go to this bar that had opened up not too far away. It was the kind of place that didn't card and we wanted drinks. We got there and one of the guys I was with was carrying a pocket knife. The bouncer told him he couldn't take it in, so he left it with the girl at the front. Well, after an hour, we start to realize just how shady this place is, so we decide to leave. As we're walking out, the guy realizes he needs to get his knife back, so he goes back inside. My other friend and I are just sitting outside the door waiting when we hear an argument break out about 20 feet away. After some shouting back and forth in Spanish between the parties, we hear shots. At that point, we both roadie run to my truck and duck behind the tires. A few seconds later, the other guy we were with shows up and we get the heck out of there. A few months later, the whole place was shut down due to a police investigation involving gangs and people being chopped up in the basement. In short, went to a bar, shots fired, pieced the ever-loving frick out. Have you ever had a teacher so dumb that you questioned how they got their job? I had an older chemistry teacher in high school, probably about 50 or 60, that was just about oblivious to everything around him. Aside from just being totally disorganized in the order he taught things, so most of his lectures made no sense as we didn't have context as to what came before, here's just a general list of his escapades. Kids would be lighting up metal tongs on the Bunsen burners and fighting each other with them. One kid got a chest flap in his shirt. That was pretty funny to just flash the teacher throughout the lesson. Another kid would dump all of the chemicals he got hold of in a beaker in the far corner of the classroom after each experiment. The teacher was so inept at teaching that once on a test that he never really taught materials for, he was caught handing out random grades to all the students. He often did homework the same way, as some kids didn't even turn theirs in and would get A's and B's. I'm sure I'm missing some stuff, but that's the brunt of it. I'm not sure what happened to him, as that was my last class in my senior year. My history teacher told a class of future engineers that airplanes were only able to fly because they were built in a cross shape. You can imagine the laughter that ensued when they realized she wasn't joking. Oh, this one chemistry teacher my sophomore year. He knew the material, but he was so disorganized that it often seemed like he didn't. And when he assigned us labs, he often paid so little attention that people started messing with the equipment or chemicals. I had a chemical thrown in my hair at one point, it got so bad. The worst part was that the administration seemed to know how bad he was. They just threw us honors kids in his class and figured we'd be okay. And so many people struggled with the class that most of us ended up staying on the honors track with barely passing grades because they just called it a wash. My most memorable was my life skills teacher in Eastern Europe not so long after the Soviet Union fell. According to my teacher, you arrive in the bedroom because of temperature. Thus, rubbing your pee-pee and causing friction makes you splooge. Even as kids, we realized it was bullcrap. Humans enjoying the deed is apparently a myth, and it's a sin anyway. Allegedly, I've got good education by the world's standards. If that's true, I'm afraid to know how low the bar is set. You know, I had to take a lot of words out and switch in very juvenile things into the story to make it usable on the webinets, and honestly, I have to wonder if more than half of our viewers actually understood it afterwards. Still, colour me educated that there are parts of Eastern Europe that are just as repressed about what goes on in adult bedrooms as some US red states and UK Christian schools. Holy frick, I have needed this outlet. I had a teacher for my freshman year of high school. Now I know every student hates a teacher, but this was different. She was a math teacher who accused everybody of cheating. I was in an honours class with my best friend and we were comparing answers on a packet that she had graded and passed back. He and I had similar answers, but different grades. For example, question 5. We'd both answer A, except he got it right and I didn't. We asked her why, and she just started screaming at us, accusing us of cheating, even though the paper was already passed back. And this was only one instance. She took students' papers away and trashed them for no reason, time over time. And she seemed to target my friend. My friend had all A's, a strict mother who wouldn't accept anything below a B, and he is in my eyes a genius. Our teacher treated him so crappy that he literally tried to self-delete because of the snowball effect of getting bad grades and his mum treating him badly. Not to mention, she thinks she's a wizard and threatened to get her wand out on us. She sat on 2 chairs because she was so large that one wasn't enough, and her students once made a petition to get rid of her. Took some entry history's GE course my first year of college. The first words out of the professor's mouth was, "I know this is an entry history course most of you are taking as a requirement for another field, but I'm going to make it so difficult, most if not all of you are going to fail and drop out." Yeah, nah. I walked out and signed up for a different history course to satisfy the requirement and got an A. Some professors say this on the first day to scare off lazy students, but don't actually follow through with the threat. I had one professor who said something similar on the first day. The next class, he looked around the room, took stock of how many students didn't show up and said, "Yeah, this is a much more manageable class size," and smiled. Mine wasn't dumb per se, but she never liked to teach. She literally slept during lectures. She only gave tons of homework and didn't even teach how it was done. But when our principal used to come to check, she'd suddenly start acting like she was the best teacher ever so that she didn't get fired. That way, we couldn't even make any complaints. I'm so glad I finished school. I've had unbelievably bad teachers at least 5 times. I wouldn't call them dumb, just not professional enough. Substitutes don't count, I assume, but every English teacher I've had, except for one, didn't speak English properly. I'm in a French province of Canada, by the way. I always end up being praised for being bilingual, but like, you studied this in university, teacher. My third English teacher once asked me to stay after class to read a letter she wrote for a retiring co-worker in English to check if there were any mistakes. That honestly made me laugh afterwards. We hardly learn anything in English most of the time. It's just French storytelling and talking. Good job. I have a math teacher who does this thing where if they forget to check homework or anything, they put a 0 in for it. So then my parents see it and I get in trouble for the teacher's stupid mistakes. I also had a teacher that said, "Medication can't help your ADHD, it's just an excuse." And I had to try my best not to simultaneously yell and laugh my butt off. My history teacher argued with me for about an hour. He was teaching us World War II history. He was saying that Japan never took part. That's the English education system in a nutshell, people. In my freshman year of high school, my chemistry teacher went on maternity leave, and the long-term sub was nothing short of an idiot. Not only did he not know half the material he needed to teach, he spent an entire 80-minute class period once lecturing us on why global warming isn't real. This year, during the first 2 months of the school year, my AP Calc teacher had to be on leave due to an injury. The replacement sub was a straight-up dumb moron. The guy didn't know what he was talking about, confused the living frick out of so many easy early concepts, and couldn't even do basic differentiation questions right. Add to that his daily rants about using online websites. His lectures composed of showing us the textbook for 5 seconds on the projector. I was so confused in that class by the time the real teacher came back. Thankfully, she isn't an idiot, so I didn't fail out. But damn, that guy should not be a long-term sub. I had a French teacher that didn't speak French, and another that couldn't control the class, so she handed out French crossword puzzles and word searches. She was such a sweet, nice teacher, but that class was awful, and I was so glad when I got out of it. It was grade 7, so we were together for all subjects. The history teacher got fed up at the class failing his tests. They were a bit bullcrap, to be fair, asking for minute details instead of what impact they had, so he just started giving out answers for the test for you to memorize. Then when that didn't work, giving out the answers and having the option for open book tests for 60%. I had an English teacher who was absurdly sheltered and dumb. She was in her 60s, and I think she had no contact with the outside world. This was a college-level ESL, English as Second Language class. English is not my first language, but I was already fluent by then. She was teaching us business jargon one day, and she said, a multiplex was a cinema room with a screen on each wall. Yes, really. And you sat at a table and you could turn around and watch whatever movie you wanted. Predictably, everyone started talking at the same time and saying that wasn't how a multiplex worked, and she kept denying it. We asked her how you'd deal with different soundtracks and if you had to pay for 4 tickets, and she said she didn't know, that she'd never been to one, but that's how they worked. I guess you could wear headphones, thinking about it now. She got really mad and ended up walking out of the class. She complained to the dean and we all got told off for questioning a teacher. Yes, really. I tuned out her voice for the rest of the year and just read books. One of my first days at my new school, our Year 5 teacher was reading Treasure Island to us, and one of the characters had a saber-cut scar on his face. She said it was from a saber-toothed tiger. I piped up and said something like, "That's nonsense, saber-toothed tigers are extinct." Her response was, "Treasure Island was written a long time ago." Not a teenager, but my college history professor told us all American Indians were vegan because they understood that killing animals was wrong. You mean the ones that literally wear skin? Those are the ones, yeah. At the same college, I took part in an archaeological dig at a woodland Indian site. It was an old village site, so lots of menial everyday things were found, like pieces of pottery, hearthstones, grinding stones, fish hooks, and burned animal bones. Oh boy. Guys, as a history graduate, I'm frankly mortified at the poor showing from the world's history teachers on display in this video. I can only promise you that of the many I had in my high school and college years, there were only 1 or 2 bad eggs out of the batch of more than 20, and none of them acted on the same level of blatant speculation as some of these. History is cool, and people who graduate in it are smart and hot, I promise. Now let's read this next story. Oh, damn it! My history teacher doesn't believe in the moon landings. My 7th grade social studies teacher, public school in Indiana, asserted that Mahatma Gandhi was a Christian who converted from Islam. I didn't even bother to try and correct her. Crazy stuff like this came out of her mouth almost constantly, and I got sick of trying to address it because the principals didn't care either. She also had a large nativity scene on her desk that took up over 1/3 of it. Welcome to Indiana, where incompetent teaching and religious proselytizing go hand in hand. I had a teacher in needlework. She was gone for literal months, and there were so few teachers in needlework in Sweden, so we had no substitute, and therefore we had no lessons that hour. One lesson she was here, and we did a test. Whatever score we got that test was our final grade, and I don't know why she's still teaching to this very day. My science teacher thought Galileo's telescope was a space telescope, and my chemistry teacher was so gosh darn clumsy she dropped a mercury container and spilled hydrochloric acid in my class. I heard she broke some other stuff and experiments went wrong. No one died or got seriously injured, but I don't know how she got that job, held it, or stayed alive. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Happens all the time where I go to school in a third world country because it's a school that doesn't pay teachers very well, meaning that we're always short on teachers, meaning we'll accept anybody to teach, even if they have no idea what they're teaching. So, we had one person who might have been a criminal or something because he changed his nationality and his name and came here to work even though our school doesn't pay him. Now he's left, probably on the run. Oh yeah, and don't get me started on the flat earther physics teacher. My Year 10 physics teacher. Physics was my weakest subject throughout school, so I tended to ask quite a few questions. I'd always try working it out by myself first, by using the 2 books we were given, but sometimes had to go ask the teacher because I just wasn't getting it. She'd always tell me to refer back to my book. What does the book say? Hold on, let me look in the book. How did you become a physics teacher if you can't explain anything without a book? It got to the point where I stopped asking her anything because she was zero help. My old German teacher was similar in that he'd never told us anything. He'd tell us the definition of a word like once, and then if I asked, he'd go, "We went over this earlier." It frickin' teed me off. He either got fired for being crap or quit because the rest of my class basically bullied him out. Recently, I found out he wasn't even an actual German teacher. He was a college math professor who apparently just happened to know German. The new teacher's fun, though. I had one that said sound traveled faster than light. Then they yelled at me when I tried to correct them. Once a teacher told us that if we were absent, we should just get the notes from another student, and then proceeded to make her notes in such a way that if we weren't present in class, we would not be able to understand them. She wouldn't explain them to us if we weren't there, and she just expected us to show up no matter what. Another teacher told a student that missing for funerals was irresponsible and that they should have planned the dates for it better. Like, Larry, that's not how that works. My art teacher in elementary. Whenever I'd draw something, I'd work my butt off. Then she'd give me crap about it lacking texture, shading, or that it wasn't round enough for her. Keep in mind, this is from kindergarten to 5th grade. It would get to the point where I was so frustrated that I was crying, and she wouldn't do anything. She was acting like she expects us to have college art skills. She was the same with my sister as well. I really hope she's not teaching anymore. What a cow she was. Old and cranky, too. Every history teacher I had didn't understand nor had a grasp on what they were teaching. We were just memorizing events. They'd be like, "In year X, the Magna Charta was signed." "What was it for, miss?" "Why did they need it, miss?" Followed by like 10 seconds of prevaricating and stupid face. My friend has a long-term sub. Said sub never actually teaches. Instead, she yells at the class and then just does the work. A lot of the kids have to go on Google and YouTube for help. Yes, my English teacher started teaching in our school this year, but she doesn't even speak the language, eh? She tries to teach complex grammar, she messes up every gosh darn time, and I just feel bad for most of my classmates who already have troubles with foreign languages. A little bit of context, I'm from the Philippines and English isn't the native language, but it's almost as widely used in the country. In fact, the Philippines is one of the countries who speak the language fluently along with native speakers. But oh god, I had this teacher who taught our English class in grade 10, but was almost always grammatically incorrect and spelled words wrong a lot of the time. I don't judge people who have a hard time constructing a sentence in the language, because as I've said, it wasn't the mother tongue, but actually teaching it? That should be a whole different level, man. Once, our top student at the time, who was a little more advanced than the rest of us, once contradicted her, but she got mad and so defensive that she shut him up and made him sit down. We researched the lesson and found out our classmate was right. I was so frustrated that year, and apparently news flew to the administration and she got transferred the next term. It was just so crappy that we had to endure a whole fricking year with her having not a single thing learned. There was this morbidly obese teacher that told us to run faster during recess. She was over 400 pounds and told us that we were slow. Me and my friends nicknamed her the Tin Can for no reason. She was fired 2 months later. I had the geometry teacher in 8th grade, who I had to teach how to construct parallelogram in front of class. On the same level, another teacher had to come teach my teacher that parabolas do in fact not come to a point like a Native American arrowhead. She was a last-minute long-term sub, but also fresh off her master's. Needless to say, she wasn't asked to return, and many did horribly that year. I ended up getting a tutor. She also gave us a bag of raisins for a Pi Day celebration. Like, okay? When I was 19 in university, my biology teacher, who had a PhD, refused to teach evolution because she was a creationist Christian. She was required to have an evolution lecture, so she had another professor come and give it, but she sat in the front, and if anyone asked a question, she'd glare at them. I do not know how she got a degree, let alone became a college professor. Okay, as bad as some of the humanities options have been so far, I can at least see some of them as being extreme examples of there being room for open interpretations within some of those specific subjects, however awful they happen to be. On the other hand, a freaking scientist just flat out telling you their entire field is wrong, having got their degree and job in it, is possibly even more mind-blowing. I had this one computer science teacher who had absolutely no idea what he was doing. We had to tell him what to do half the time, as he'd be taking these long, roundabout ways of doing very simple things. I was showing my best friend something about India once, since I'm half Indian. My best friend wants to know a little more about it, then we came to religions and I showed him some of them and their symbols. In case you didn't know, the leader of the Third Reich adopted his main symbol from one of these symbols. Then one of our teachers came over and tells us to go away from all that fascist stuff, and I explained to her that it's just some Indian religions. And she answers, well, then there must have been a lot of fascists there. I've never wanted to speak to her since, and I'm glad we don't have her anymore. Our class usually likes the religion teacher, however one time he said he didn't believe in evolution because he doesn't identify with monkeys. Of course, that's because through evolution we became a different species. My Year 10 Understanding the Human Body teacher. On the first day of class, he actually admitted that he was a physics teacher. I'm not saying that he was bad at physics, but I don't understand why he was teaching bio. We'd ask him questions about the material, and he'd usually say that he doesn't know. Most of the stuff he either got out of a textbook without explaining it thoroughly, or he'd Google it. The class average for the exams was about 55 or 60. My politics teacher was a frickin' joke. The only thing he did was giving us worksheets, which he got from the internet, probably for free, and while we tried to complete them, he was in the back of the class doing crap with his iPad. Most of the time, he didn't even know the correct answers to the worksheets. We had one test in this class, and it was about recent news. We should just watch the news to study. There was a fricking soccer question like, what was the score of this particular match? God, I got so mad. Thank goodness we only had this class once every 2 weeks for one semester. I hated that lazy piece of crap. Once we had a woman who was a supply teacher, I think. She tried to tap the touchscreen whiteboard in our classroom for some kind of presentation. This was a while ago. I was like 10, so I'm a bit hazy on the details. Except it wasn't a touchscreen whiteboard at all. It was a projected image on a whiteboard. She was just poking at a whiteboard, and we all found it pathetic. I guess I have two. I had a cooking teacher who was a bit strange, and I didn't realize how messed up she was until thinking about high school in retrospect. There were some of the obligatory bad teacher things, like putting stuff on tests that we didn't learn, taking points off for little to no reason, weird traditions she did when she taught us recipes that we had to copy, even if it made the dish worse. But upon thinking back on it, the strangest standout was that she seemed to have a weird vendetta against disabled students. There was a kid in my class, let's call him Carl, who definitely had some mental setbacks. She'd accuse him of cheating on written parts of the tests, and when we'd do the practical exams, she insisted that she had to be his cooking partner so he didn't mess up the kitchen. But the worst of these sorts of offenses against Carl was when Carl was baking a cookie cake and got excited about the Batman logo he was making in the frosting on the cake. He was very vocal about how he was proud of his design coming along when the teacher came over and said, "Carl, cut that crap out," and took his frosting. His decoration was left half done and probably got points off for unfinished decoration. It was really messed up how she treated him. Then there was me. I was a type 1 diabetic, which for those of you who don't know is different from type 2 and can't be brought on by poor eating or weight. My body simply decides to attack my pancreas sometimes, so now I have to monitor my blood sugar levels to make sure I don't die. Type 1 is with you for life. It's incurable, and I have to wear machines on my body that help with management. Whenever I had to do anything related to my disability, the teacher would insist that I had to go into the back laundry room to do it, whether it was checking my blood sugar or giving myself insulin. I didn't think much of it at the time until now realizing it, I had an accommodation on my 504 saying I didn't have to leave the room. She also made an offhand comment to me about eating better and said that that would cure my diabetes. Thanks, I'll be sure to look into pancreas-repairing beets someday. So my other story is my 5th grade teacher, who to this day I'm convinced was a mass hallucination me and my other classmates had. She was a very small woman, smaller than some of the 5th graders she taught. Despite this, she'd do everything in her power to intimidate us, even if that meant climbing on her desk and screaming. One time she tried to give me a detention for leaning back in my chair. Not much more about that. Also, during science lessons, she'd call simulations stimulations. The real kicker was that one time she accused a kid of having a messy desk. These were the ones that had little cubby holes underneath them, bigger than a drawer, and they were just kind of open. As a follow-up to this, she picked up the kid's desk without warning, tipped it and dumped all of his crap on the ground, tossed the deck to the side and yelled, "Clean it!" at the kid while pointing at the pile on the floor. I'm pretty sure the kid cried. I can't remember for sure though. In short, one of them was super prejudiced against the disabled, and another was a very angry halfling. What is the most shocking piece of clothing someone has worn to a job interview? A few years back, I had someone show up fresh out of the swimming pool. Hair wet, bathing suit and cover-up on, still wet. Hadn't taken the time to dry off. I went through the interview and a test simulation of the job with her. She actually did very well at the simulation. When I took her to see my boss that made the ultimate decision, he took one look and just said, no. Didn't ask about the simulation or anything, just no. And no, it wasn't a lifeguard position, it was for a small textile company that manufactures cleaning room supplies. In her defense, my boss was a complete C-word though. I have numerous stories about why he did and didn't hire someone after I did initial interview assessments. Homecoming dress. She knew she was supposed to dress up for the interview, and that was the nicest thing she had. I felt so bad, and she seemed incredibly embarrassed. It was her first real interview, and in the end I gave her credit for at least putting in the effort. For everyone asking, yes, she did get a job offer. The attire didn't factor in nearly as much as her coming in prepared, on time, and with questions. It really sucks being on the poor end of trying to dress nice, but you literally can't afford to. Over the past few months of thrifting, I've managed to piece together a really nice-looking suit for $5 shoes, $15 pants, an $8 jacket, and a $4 shirt, along with a $2 tie and $1 pair of socks. $35. I just had my first interview for a job for when I graduate college, and I was complimented at the interview on my outfit. It took forever finding a matching navy jacket and pants that both fit, but I eventually did because I can't afford a $200 suit. He came into the IT interview in polo, khakis, and aqua-colored Crocs with an anime maid blushing painted on one and lining up a sniper shot on the other. Oh, and he was late because security was concerned about his My Little Pony chain wallet. A pair of flesh-colored leggings that made her look as if she wasn't wearing pants at all, a sweatshirt that opened in the front that had been pulled to the side a bit to reveal a lacy camisole top. We work as therapists. No frickin' way she got that job. For more info, both her wig and glasses were askew. There was an odor somewhere between human and cat urine. And about halfway through, she asked if she could take a break because she left her car running to charge her phone. Well, I saw a guy come from the country club pool in an American flag tank top and swim trunks to the club's golf cart boy interview. He didn't get the job and then came back a week later in a full suit apologizing for his previous attire. Well, 2 of our 5 stories so far have swimming outfits involved for non-pool related jobs. And since we have another 15 to 20 minutes to fill, I'd wager we'll get at least one more by the end of the video. I worked in the US Senate a couple of years back. We were interviewing about a half dozen candidates for a pretty junior position. One of the interviewees was wearing a Harvard t-shirt, a Harvard jacket, and Harvard sweatpants. We were astounded. The first question my coworker asked was, did you go to Harvard? The guy did, and he handled the rest of the interview surprisingly well. He didn't get the job, but he did become a running joke in the office for a while. I guess he was trying to get a set bonus? Well, he forgot to wear his Harvard underwear, so the bonus didn't take effect, you see. My master's student came to defend his thesis barefoot because his slippers got wet. This was in Estonia. My best friend's husband tried to explain to her that defending his thesis in a t-shirt with a Star Trek quote on it was fine, paired with ripped jeans and dirty sneakers. He's a computer science major with a focus on security. She disagreed. She's an opera singer who holds degrees in music and fine arts and did her thesis defenses in ball gowns. She made him wear a sport coat, dress shirt, and nice pants, but didn't force a tie. His entire defense panel was wearing t-shirts, and one of them was barefoot the entire time. I was the person in question. This was 20 years ago and I just moved to the city. I was 17 and I spent 3 weeks working as a hostess at Denny's. A friend asked if I wanted to go rollerblading, so I was strapped into my rollerblades and was wearing athletic wear. She then pulled up to her gym, had me walk in my rollerblades up to the 2nd story where the daycare was, and told me that I was interviewing for the nanny job that she heard was available. I actually got the job because the woman who owned the gym was impressed that I could climb stairs in my rollerblades. I interviewed a young woman who wore a skirt so short I could actually see her underwear when she sat down. They were pink, by the way. I gave her feedback later that she should have worn a suit. This was for a business analyst role. Everyone else was wearing a suit. Saggy pants with whitey-tighty underwear. When he bent over to sign in at the desk, you could see his whole butt, but thankfully not his butthole. Pajamas. She was pulled out of bed and brought to me and my boss for an interview. She didn't know she was having it. After 5 minutes, we offered her a job and she actually turned out really well. Back when I was an hourly manager at Walmart, a guy came in with greasy hair, white t-shirt full of holes and sweatpants. And to top it all off, he looked like he was rocking a semi. Surprisingly, he didn't smell, and his clothes actually looked clean, so that was good? But still, I gave him a hard no. Unfortunately, the overnight assistant gave him the go-ahead, because he wasn't going to be on her shift and she thought it was hilarious. This guy was a frickin' nightmare. He wore that same outfit, now never washed, almost daily. He smelled like death, turds, and cumin. And he was crazy. We were finally able to fire him after he pulled out his pocket knife and cut his coworker. Thankfully, the cut didn't cause any real damage to the kid, but seriously, what the frick? I worked with a guy who applied to the local big city fire department. Apparently, all candidates had to submit a passport-type photo of themselves, although I fail to see how that's relevant. Diversity quotas, perhaps. Anyways, this guy was a gym nut and also sent a full head and torso of himself with no shirt on. When I asked him why, he replied, "So they know I'm not a twink." Well, it must have worked, as Twinkie is now a firefighter. One time I was having dinner in a restaurant and saw a young woman come up to the counter and ask for a job application. The employees gave her one and she sat down near me to fill it out. This was when I noticed she was wearing a cap with a huge devil's lettuce leaf on it. She finished it, returned it to the counter, and asked what the follow-up would be. The employee said, "We'll contact you in a few days for an interview, and when you come back, don't wear that hat. Go spend a day in court. You'll be amazed at how many people show up to the judge in their best green leaf or rebel flag t-shirts." I have one from just last month. This guy was coming in to interview for a financial advisor program. Everyone in our office dresses very professionally, and most people I interview are dressed in their best suits. This gentleman came in wearing a stained white dress shirt with a yellow-tinted white undershirt. I kind of forget what pants, but he had a neon green and black Joker belt. "Why so serious?" was written all over it with the Joker's face. He didn't loop said belt through the rest of his pants, so it was swaying around while he was walking. He also had very long, creepy fingernails that were dirty, and he kept rolling and rubbing his fingers together to get the dirt off subconsciously. The icing on the cake was that he coughed and snorted something up very loudly, then swallowed it and loudly commented, "Nice." Somehow, this guy aced our assessment and put together a great resume, but was just the exact opposite of professional in person. We're still not sure if he was just trying to mess with us, screw the interview, or if he was just that oblivious. I just assumed he was interviewing for someone else, like Ben Affleck in Good Will Hunting. Woo boy, the guy without pants. At my last job, I spent 10 months in 2017 on a research team doing statistical learning research for health informatics. It was a very large healthcare company, and they basically took almost a dozen of their PhD researchers from BI, R&D, and market dev, temporarily reassigned them to the new Center for Data Excellence. 2 of the PhDs were director or AVP level, so they got to bring a team member with them. My director brought me from market dev because of my background in mathematical modeling, but the other guy didn't really have anyone suitable in his department who he was free to bring along. So they posted the job and started interviewing. I'd do the pre-interview stuff with one of the junior PhDs and then the senior team members who come in. Anyway, 4 days into interviewing, we get one guy up on Skype for his interview, and he's way too close to the screen, like his laptop is up on his knees. We ask him to move the laptop back a bit, and he gives it up that he can't, because the lower part of his shirt has a huge, fresh coffee stain, and his pants are hanging on the adjacent wall. He had lost track of time and rushed home, and had spilled his coffee in his hurry. We told him, "No problem, we'll find a new time for you. The shirt might be a goner, but be sure to wash those pants in hot water right away." We actually hired that guy, and I think he's still there. Great guy. Folks, I like to think we can take positive lessons away from these videos sometimes, and this story just goes to show that if everything goes to crap, honesty is probably the best policy. It might not turn out as good as this particular case, but it's generally better than the consequences of being caught in a lie. Fellow I knew was the counselor at the unemployment center. He said he had to explain to one guy he was coaching for job interviews, "Don't wear the hat that says, 'Beer makes me smarter.'" A Hegao hoodie. I must be getting old. I had to head to Urban Dictionary to figure out what that meant. Late to the party, but I had a young guy come in one day who I think was clearly trying to not get the job. Like his dad gave him an ultimatum to get a job or get out kind of thing, and he was just going to do interviews to appease him. He had his hair in pigtails high on the sides of his head with wire threaded in them so they'd stick out. Black t-shirt that said the F word on it in giant white letters. Plaid schoolgirl-style skirt, rainbow tights, and 90s chunky club kid-style shoes. It wasn't so much the inappropriate clothing, it was more the action of uncrossing her legs very wide while wearing a short skirt. Meanwhile, never taking her eyes off mine. Yeah, she was an HR nightmare waiting to happen. A tight muscle shirt. It's great that you work out, big guy, but it's not a gym. Plus, he only worked his glamour muscles. He was thick around the middle. Dude, at least give the office a show. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I've never had to deal with inappropriate clothing at an interview before, but, and this is probably worse, I did have to try and explain away to elected officials and citizens at a public consultation why my engineering consultant we contracted out for a portion of developing that town's strategic plan showed up in a fricking Hawaiian shirt and flip-flops. The reason I gave was that he wanted to stand out and field as many questions as possible by sticking out like a sore thumb and seeming approachable. The real reason was that this was his last gig before retirement, so he had 0 Fs to give, and he had just signed his divorce papers that morning and spent the afternoon drinking at the hotel bar with his lawyer. Unfrickin' real. Nothing in his contract dictated anything about attire, since 99% of what he was paid to do was going to be done from his winter place in Arizona. He was only expected to show up to any public consultations. You'd better frickin' believe our standard contracts going forward included a clause about dress. Had a candidate come in for a recruiting role. She was young and beautiful, but she was wearing some of the tightest yoga pants ever. Nothing was left to the imagination. Her top looked very professional, though. I had the same thing happen. Young, attractive, yoga pants that seemed painted on, college hoodie. 2 out of the 5 people on her interview loop were women, one being a manager, and she absolutely aced the interview. Nobody said a frickin' thing about the yoga pants, and they hired her. A see-through shirt. I could make out the details of her bra. Right after that, a candidate came in with one eye in bright green shadow, liner and mascara, and the other eye completely free of makeup. Poor attention to detail. That was such a weird day. I actually got a job by showing up scruffy. At the time, I'd been working construction, trying to get back into office work. I saw a now hiring site and just wandered in and asked for an application. The person who handed me the application was nice and polite to my face, then told another coworker, that guy has no chance showing up like that. The other coworker, who was my cousin, informed the HR manager, who called me to apologize and invited me for an interview. I didn't even know what had transpired until my cousin told me later, but I said, "Oh, no worries. I was just passing through, and obviously I'll be appropriately dressed if you hire me." I made sure I was properly cleaned up and dressed appropriately for the interview. Got the job and ended up working there for 5 years. Had they not made the stupid remark, I might not have been considered. I had an interview for an entry-level customer service position at a large company, showed to our interview 15 minutes late in Hello Kitty pajama bottoms, a matching backpack, a bright pink hoodie, and warm, fuzzy slippers. I didn't even bother with the interview as she was late, but that has to be one of the most unprofessional outfits I've seen in my hiring experience. The other I recall was a young woman interviewing for a customer service position at the airline I was at, in an extremely low-cut blouse and short skirt, all in black. Mentioned something during the interview about how she hadn't smoked Green Hub in a couple of weeks and wanted to make sure we knew that she wasn't high. I recently watched this train wreck happen. My boyfriend's second job had just hired several new people. My boyfriend and I were hanging out at his place for work after his shift was over, and we had the pleasure of witnessing an interview. Please note that this is a pretty casual place. All the workers there wear jeans and gym shoes or boots to work. Their uniform is a t-shirt with the company logo. Although sometimes the workers come in wearing a different, occasionally nicer top depending on if there is an event or something. The interviewee shows up wearing the tiniest, tightest, sparkliest party dress I've ever seen in my life. It barely covered the naughty bits of her chest. Her entire braless back was exposed, and when she sat down on the chair for her interview, her whole bare butt hit the chair because the dress couldn't physically stay over her bum while sitting. She was also wearing 6-inch heels. No offense meant towards working girls, truly, seeing as how my best friend was one for a bit, but she honest to God looked like she'd just walked in from the street corner. The only place that outfit would have been appropriate was in a bedroom. Really. I can't stress enough just how little clothing this lady was wearing. It was truly one of those situations where you knew you weren't supposed to stare, but you just couldn't look away. There were customers there at the time as well, and nearly all of them were staring at her in shock, the exception being a couple of men who were there with their wives. Those men were staring straight forward, wide-eyed, not daring to move their heads an inch lest their wives think they were looking. Like, it was a spectacle. Anyway, so the next day, boyfriend finds out they hired her. Apparently, the skeevy old owner of the place liked her resume after all. Hopefully she remembers to wear pants or at least undies when she starts. I worked for a high-end software development firm. We wore business casual and were fairly on the casual end of that. But one day someone showed up to the interview in a bright fluorescent orange oversized hoodie, cargo pants, and sandals. They did not get the job. Look man, it's really hard work turning a prison jumpsuit into any sort of outfit, and hoodie was the best they could do in the circumstances. I do wonder who they killed for the rest of that outfit though. I was a recruitment manager for a call center, and oh man, let me list a few. There was the 20-something-year-old strolling in sweatpants that said, "I smoke green herb 420" all over them. Literally. A t-shirt that said, "I hate work." A giant gold necklace that said the B word. Leggings with way too much camel toe, an exotic dancer who came to her interview straight from work, an old man who for some reason made holes in his shirt for his nips to be exposed, a Ninja Turtle set of pajamas, a man who actually wore decent clothing but then tried to take it off and lay like a plank on the lobby floor. When he went to the elevator, he burned off his buttons with a lighter. None of this is made up. What an experience. An extremely short dress, but I ended up hiring her because she had experience. Turned out she was pregnant and coming from school, and her husband had met her at the interview site so she could change clothes, and that's what he'd bought. She was so embarrassed, but didn't have time to go home and change into something else. She ended up being the best worker I'd ever hired. Don't judge a book by its cover. Well, I was the applicant, and I, a dude, had a lucky pink thong on under my pants for an interview. I got the job, and I'm definitely gonna wear it again. I have a story. I work at a hotel. One day, a young lady came in asking about a housekeeping job. Our executive housekeeper was still there, so I called her office and let her know she had a potential applicant. She said she had a moment, she'd be right over. She came out, took one glance at her, and told her we're not hiring. The lady left. The executive housekeeper then told me not to send anyone looking like that to her. I asked why. She said, "Did you look at her? The young lady was wearing very tight jeans with holes in them, and it was very obvious she wasn't wearing any undies since half her rear end was showing. She had on what looked like exotic dancer heels and was wearing a halter top so tight that it left nothing to the imagination." I work in a phone shop, salesman, and we had an open day hiring event where anyone could walk in and be interviewed. We were always desperate for staff because the turnover was insane due to the job being sold as a dream while it was actually more of a nightmare. Most people showed up in their smart or smart casual wear, stuff you'd expect for an interview, but one guy had some real BDE. From top to bottom it went ripped jeans, Che Guevara top, 2 sweatbands on his wrists, and the creme de la creme, a snapback cap with the phrase, "F what you think" printed on it. What possessed this guy to think it was a good idea to wear a hat that literally calls out the interviewer's opinion of them? I'll never really know. All I do know, though, is that out of the 50 or so odd interviewees, this guy was miles above the rest in terms of how well he interviewed. As you'd imagine, he didn't get offered the job purely because of his clothing, proving that you should always at least make an effort, and don't wear a hat cussing the interviewer. I'd put in an application for my current job and was asked if I could come in and interview within a couple of hours. I was volunteering at a therapy stable in the summer heat when they called in. I told them that I wasn't at all dressed to impress, but I was willing to come in anyway. So I walked in there in yoga pants, a tank top and muck boots, sweaty and stinking of horses. I got the job. Back in ancient times when you still got an application, I walked into a Dillard's wearing jeans and a t-shirt. I went to customer service and asked for an application. An older, extremely well-dressed lady was there and she asked me if I owned a suit. I said, "If you hire me, I'll get one." She said, "Go back to men's and get fitted." She was the area sales manager for women's shoes. At the time, and as far as I know still, Dillard's had a policy that women's shoes would have an attractive young man in a suit. Apparently I qualified as attractive. Her previous token had been transferred to a much larger store because he was so good at his job. Our store was kind of in the minor leagues, and she needed to get a new live-body male that day. The next not gargoyle who walked in was getting hired. I walked in and apparently wasn't a gargoyle, and the last thing she told me was, "Never come into the store in jeans again, not even on your day off." We were one step away from Disney in maintaining the fantasy. Oh, that low-cut dress. We could really see all of his chest hair. My lord, where to start? My favorite one first. A guy came in wearing a cap that had white snow and caviar on it. There was also a girl wearing Daisy Dukes, many track suits, football shirt guys, dirty suit guys, leggings that are far too stretched and almost clear on the bum women, short skirts, jeans, and the list goes on. I had a candidate show up to the interview shirtless. When I worked in retail sales, I remember a guy walking in, saluting me with an odd level of enthusiasm, telling me he had just gotten out of the service and asked for an application. He was also drunk off his mind and smelled like BO and gin. He did not get an interview. I had a man show up in a very dirty, badly ripped pair of jeans and a tattered baseball cap. He'd also decided to dye his hair pumpkin orange and pull it through the back hole of the cap. No ponytail, just contained by the open hole on the cap. A guy in a Harley t-shirt came by applying for a job. What was so special was his Harley hat and the half-smoked and buttered-out cigarette he had behind his ear. I actually thought it was a practical joke or something. People who survived an attack on their lives, what's your story? I was outside in my garage petting my cat. It was November, so it was already dark by 5 p.m. Someone opened the door behind me without me hearing, grabbed me by my ponytail and started dragging me outside. They hit me on the head with a brick and knocked me out. Pulled me halfway around my house. I'm guessing this is when they stabbed me on the left side of my stomach. This must have brought me out of the daze because my mum said she heard me scream from inside where she and my brother and sister were in the kitchen. They came out the front door and saw me bleeding out on the sidewalk and called 911. I had 12 stitches, double layer, a severe concussion, and whiplash. I didn't eat and hardly slept for a week. They never found them. I was riding a train across Eastern Europe. I was running low on money, and even though I'd been warned that a woman should not travel alone in second-class seating, I didn't spring for first class. I was sitting alone in one of the compartments that seats 6. This was also a mistake and a very stupid one to sit alone. Eventually, the train stopped and a man got on. He was very drunk. He came into my compartment, and I guess he thought that I looked like his ex-wife. He attacked me. If it weren't for the fact that this particular station was at the border between 2 countries, I'd be dead. Instead, border patrol from both countries were on the train, and while I was unable to scream, the door was open and at least a half-dozen uniformed men jumped in and saved me. I was in the hospital for a bit, but I recovered. At one point during the trial, one of the cops asked me if I wanted him and his buddies to hold down the guy while I hit him. I thought he was joking, so I said no, go ahead, you do it. I was also joking, but it turns out they took it seriously and were about to. I did put a stop to that at least, but they were so offended that someone from their country would attack a young female American tourist. They were furious with him. So many people there depended on tourism. My sister had this one friend when we were growing up. I always got a bad vibe from them. She had tried to pick on my little brother, but I'd always stop her. Once we were at a lake and all the kids were swimming. I swam out into the deep roped-off part, but I was still little and really shouldn't have. She kept acting weird and getting close to me, making this weird laugh. She pushed me off the wooden pole in the water, and I got scared and started to swim back, but she came up behind me and pushed me under. It didn't click at first that she was trying to drown me, but after she aggressively pushed me under the 3rd time, I had this crazy moment of clarity. It was like the world slowed down ever so briefly. I relaxed and let myself sink, swam underneath her, and came up behind her. I grabbed her hair and shoved her face into the water, keeping my legs on her back so her body couldn't rise. I waited until her struggling slowed down a little and then let her come back up. I waited in the water, saying nothing, bracing myself for her retaliation, but she just looked panicked and swam back to shore. I told my sister, who'd already expressed that the girl was weird. We confronted her together and she just looked really dazed. In a monotone voice, she just said, "I'm sorry, I didn't know it would be like that." It wasn't until I replayed those words in my mind later that I realized what she was saying was, "Sorry I tried to drown you." It wasn't until I almost drowned myself that I realized how horrible it is to do it to someone else. My God. Well, I can't wish that all crazy kids would have to have the same lesson put on them in order to teach them some empathy, but I'm glad she got some without a much more tragic end for anyone. I was exiting a bar once after last call and was with a friend who was a medic. We saw a girl laying in a snowbank near a telephone pole who'd just been hit by a car. We ran over and tried to help her, and some others were already on the phone with 911, and I, not having had any medical training, didn't have anything to contribute but didn't want to just leave. The whole situation was concerning. I turned around for 1 second and started to hear people screaming. I turned back around and a minivan was heading straight for us, the few people around this woman. They'd already started to run, but I was too late. They hit me as I was trying to flee. Then they put the car in the reverse, ran over me again, and then went forward and ran over me a third time. Turns out the guy was high and drunk and got into a fight with the woman's boyfriend, whom I bared a passing resemblance to. He thought I was that guy. Not to throw a pity party for myself, but 9 years later I have a ton of medical issues and my life pretty much started on a downward spiral since then. But sure, I guess I survived. For everyone wondering about the guy, an off-duty cop watched the whole thing go down and copied his license plate number. He was apprehended 20 minutes later and charged with attempted murder, along with many other things. He pled out to just 3 years in jail. He had actually killed someone else a few years before drunk driving. How they thought this was appropriate is beyond me. My husband and I live above our place of business. Our alarm company called us at 3 a.m. to say there was a motion detecting alert, just one in a weird place. We assumed it was a mouse, but went to reset it and check it out. My husband ended up face-to-face with a burglar who was on his way out of the window he'd broken. He ran back inside, I called 911, and we heard mad chaos going on in the depths of the building. So much crashing and smashing. The burglar monkey climbed a 10-foot iron gate, bodily smashed through 2 sets of commercial-grade glass doors and was outside again. My husband was like, yeah, frick this dude, tore after him and tackled him. He got him on the ground and pinned him. Bear in mind, the whole time I'm narrating to 911 and chasing around in panties and tank top. I was a bit behind my husband, in the middle of the street about 15 feet away, when a minivan squealed around the corner. It was the guy's girlfriend/getaway driver. I luckily missed it. I was super focused on reading the license plate, which was one of those cutesy font out-of-state ones and therefore hard to read, but she yelled, "Get the frick off him or I'm running your witch over!" And then she tried to run me over. The audio and vibe I had to watch for the trial was horrifying. I'd blocked it out nearly completely and really didn't remember how close it was. She gunned the engine at me, and I threw my hands up in front of my face when I realized what she was doing, and screamed, jumping out of the way with inches to spare. The guy jumped in the van and off they went. He'd bled all over my husband, yikes, and eventually the DNA and partial plate info nailed them. They're both in prison. As an addendum, trials suck. To make it clear, don't do this. Adrenaline is one heck of a thing, and it's best not to fight burglars. We definitely both could have died. It was the third time this motherfricker had broken in and caused a huge amount of mostly uninsured damage and inventory loss, and that definitely contributed to the whole thing. He wouldn't have stopped doing it. He was a pro and was doing upwards of 3 jobs a night most nights all over the state for years. My supposed best friend decided that my wife and I were too perfect. Therefore, it must all be an act and I was obviously treating her horribly. He was at our house after I made an awesome dinner and we were having fun drinking and singing karaoke. I went to the kitchen to put some glasses away, came back and leaned on the couch with him slightly behind to the left of me. Then I heard a thunk and felt an amazing amount of pain on the top of my head. He'd picked up the whiskey bottle from the table and smashed it into my skull. I was very confused as to what was happening. Then the blood started pouring. I didn't want to get blood everywhere, so I went to the kitchen. The guy was pacing back and forth saying weird stuff. I thought about pulling my gat, which was nearby, but then I wasn't really thinking straight. He left. The legal system let me down big time. They called him and asked what had happened, and that was all. They wouldn't even give me a restraining order. I had a huge concussion and still suffer side effects from it. My number 2 goal in life is to live longer than that crazy motherfricker so I can crap on his grave. If you're from the area I'm from, this will probably sound familiar. But I got absolutely blackout drunk at the end of the year and graduation party and ended up having to get taken home early. Later that night, another student at the party ended up shanking and killing 5 people. Turns out he had schizophrenia and thought everyone at the party was a werewolf or vampire who were threatening his life. He never went to jail but ended up being founded non-criminally responsible instead. As lucky as I don't feel lucky when I think about it. 3 of those people were people I grew up with. I mean, surely he got intervention by professionals or got treated somewhere, right? Even if it wasn't entirely his fault, you'd think that there would have to have been some serious correction in his life and a fair bit of counseling to get over the massive guilt of what he'd done as well. This is not a satisfying sort of justice for anyone, I suppose. A couple of years ago, my brother and I went to walk the dog at like 11 p.m. We left through the side gate, we live on a corner, and right as we exit I see this weird-looking guy at the corner of the footpath walking strangely towards us. Got bad vibes and told my brother to get the dog and get back inside. This guy's kind of walking side-on and hiding something in his hand behind his back. As I'm getting my brother through the gate, the guy says something like, "Oi mate, can I come in? I need a blanket, I'm freezing." I just ignored him and went inside and locked the door. We then got a call from the people who lived 2 doors up, said the same guy knocked on their door and their 10-year-old son opened it to see the guy holding a frickin' hatchet. Anyway, I'm glad I went with my gut on that one. I had a guy who was on both Crystal and A break into my apartment in college. Somehow he was convinced he lost his glasses inside. I'm doing dishes when my door gets slammed open. Next thing I know, he's behind me and I'm being throttled to death in my kitchen. As I was losing consciousness, I grabbed my roommate's acrylic pipe and frantically swung over my shoulder into his face. The pipe broke but did nothing as the guy was throttling me even harder. So I swung it again. Because the pipe broke the first time, I was hitting the guy with a 6-inch claw of acrylic glass. Afterwards, his scalp and part of his cheek were hanging off the side of his face. Essentially, I scalped him with a pipe. So I chased the guy out of my house. There was easily 2 feet of snow outside. He tried walking back to his house through a cemetery as a shortcut. Seriously, you can't make this crap up, and then passed out in the cemetery. The police only found him because I called the cops and they followed the blood and footprints through the snow. And that's the part I was most surprised by. I hit the guy in the scalp. There isn't much blood in the scalp compared to most of the body, but my kitchen was covered in blood. His blood was on my refrigerator, counter, floor, and ceiling. It was almost as traumatic to clean it. My roommates were gone for winter break. Thank God my roommate's girlfriend came over and helped me. Now, as for the guy, the cops couldn't charge him for 2 days because he needed blood transfusions. He was charged with battery, breaking and entering, and attempted murder. And he'd definitely had substances on him too. Not sure what he got convicted for, but he went to jail for 4 years. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Well, my one actually got some media. I'm a criminal defense attorney. I was representing this guy that had embezzled almost $500,000 from his business partner. He was looking down the barrel at several years in prison, a bunch of his assets had been seized by the government, and he was being sued by multiple creditors for north of $2 million, and was in the midst of an ugly divorce and wasn't allowed to see his kids. I was one of 3 lawyers he had: criminal, civil, and divorce. He was drinking a lot and using white snow. I used to get his incoherent phone calls in the middle of the night that ranged from threats to crying. He came to my office one day and asked for me, but I was in court. My secretary said he was perfectly civil. He then went to his divorce lawyer's office and shot him. Got stopped by the police a short distance away and was wounded in a shootout. He'd later tell the cops that he'd come to my office to shoot me that day and also planned to shoot his civil attorney. I was on the way home at night after meeting a friend. My home was just 10 minutes away from the train station. After a few minutes, I felt someone following me. No big deal, I thought, just someone else walking home. But I started walking faster anyway. I realized the person behind me was catching up, which was weird. Now, in my head, I was starting to make up scenarios of how to defend myself if the person would attack me. Never would I have thought this would actually happen until I feel something in the back of my head hitting me hard. I was instantly furious. I turned around and attacked the guy. My mind was just full of anger towards this stranger who, I thought, had hit me. We were wrestling until I fell on the ground. He was sitting on top of me, strangling me. I tried to claw my nails into his eyes as deep as I could, but then I started to black out. Suddenly, there was this thought in my head: wake up or you'll die. Well, adrenaline kicked in again and I opened my eyes and screamed at the top of my lungs, attacking him again. That helped. He stood up and began to run. I lay there for a few seconds and started to run home, still screaming. My mum was already at our door and opened for me because my screams woke her up. Or her mother's senses, who knows. She immediately called the cops and they could arrest him on the same night. It turned out that he actually shot me in the head from behind. They assumed that the weapon didn't work properly, as the bullet didn't penetrate my skull and stuck in there. But as far as I know, they never found out why the weapon misfired. I'm glad though. He told the cops that he'd already followed me a few times in the past, but had never had the guts to do it. He had wanted to kill me and then commit the unspeakable act. A customer pushed me onto a roller coaster track in the station. I work in a theme park. Luckily, the rides are covered in sensors and I tripped one, which stopped the ride. I wasn't pushed directly in front of a train. There was no intention to push me onto the track, and I didn't press charges, as there was no intention to actually kill me. We took legal action through the business. This was over a height restriction and the guy's kid was too small to ride. I was about 20 or 21 years old and walking home at about 3 a.m. after a night out, and I was absolutely plastered from drinking so much. I was about 200 meters from my house when a hooded figure jumped out from behind a bush and immediately had a knife pushing towards my stomach as he grabbed my neck and tried pulling me in. Fortunately, I was stronger and pulled away, and he went to lunge at me again when suddenly he stopped, staring for what felt like an eternity but was probably just a second or two, and then finally said, "Oh, Struth, Jimmy? I haven't seen you in so long. My bad, mate," and then walked off like nothing had happened. I still don't know who he was to this day. And this is why you always treat others with kindness and respect. Never know when an old acquaintance might try and stab you for an unknown reason. My lord. I mean, the fact that this guy was out there presumably to do this to other people as well is kind of scary, but if nothing else, the fact that he just said, "Oh, sorry about that," and then just peaced out after a life-and-death struggle is kind of morbidly funny. Chilling with the bros, drinking at a park. As we drive off to leave, a car coming our way almost hits us. The driver obviously reacts like, "What the frick?" and I guess the other car noticed, because they turn around and caught up to us at a stop sign. The other driver asked if we had a problem. We told them to stop driving like idiots. Then their back window rolls down and two guys in the back draw Glocks with drum magazines. We kinda just froze up at first, but then our driver pulled off hastily. Later found out those guys got arrested for shooting someone else that same day. In my late teens, I used to buy my green herb from random dudes in the projects, the low-income housing. One day we gave some money to a guy named 40. He took it and went inside to one of the buildings. We waited in the car for several minutes. We started to think he had taken our money and just left. Right about that time, a car full of wired white dudes pulled up besides ours. Apparently my friend who was driving owed them money. They pointed a weapon at him and said that if he had enough money to buy devil's lettuce, then he could pay them back. I really thought they were going to start shooting and just drive off like it was nothing, and I hadn't even done anything wrong. I thought I was going to pee my pants. Right about that time, 40 came back with our stuff and an even bigger weapon. He scared them away, and then we went back to his apartment and smoked a big old roll. What a good guy. Turns out he was only selling Mary J because he had a 6-year-old daughter, and that was the only way he knew how to give her a better life than he had. I babysat his daughter occasionally for the rest of that summer. I really hope she got a decent childhood and that her dad stayed safe and out of jail. In short, almost got shot, but was saved by a random dealer who turned out to be a nice guy. I was 16 and 2 weeks into my first job at a smoothie establishment that should be known to NBA fans. We were robbed. It was late, and my co-worker's friends had been playing pranks on her all day, so when I saw someone burst through the door, I thought it was just that. Until that is, I had something metal pressed against my back and an arm wrapped around my chest. The robber gave me the whole stereotypical, "give me all the money" spiel, and ordered us to go into the back room, kneel down and face the wall. As I was kneeling and hearing him walking towards us, time seemed to slow down. Thankfully, I'd been refilling juices when he came in, so the door to the back room was partially blocked by a heavy cart. With whatever substance he was on, he wasn't coordinated enough to get past it to us, so he fled. He was followed by my co-worker's husband and caught. When he was caught, they found an industrial-sized pipe wrench strapped tightly to his fist so that he could get a stronger grip when swinging. I'm so glad that cart was there. Once a year or so, I'd look him up in the parish prison roster to see if he was still in jail. One year, he suddenly wasn't. I later found him named in a lawsuit as having shanked his cellmate a half-dozen times while the guy was asleep. Definitely doesn't seem like the nicest of guys. 9 years later, I'm still unpacking this incident in therapy. It's why I don't like walking around cities at night or sitting where I can't see the door. This all happened many years ago. I was a lead man at a factory. A girl started working there and I took an interest. After a few months, I found out she was in a substance-fueled, terrible relationship. Every night I told her to call me, I'll come get her. Finally, after months, she calls me, I come get her and take her to my house. The guy she was in the relationship with didn't take too kindly to me taking her away. He spends the next 2 years hanging around and threatening us. A few months after she and I got married, we went out for drinks. Her ex just happened to be at the bar we went to. He apologized to us for his whole threatening demeanor in the past. We were sitting outside talking with a few other people. Next thing I know, I was on my back on the ground with someone choking me. I try all I can to get them off me, but being blindsided and having them on top of me, it wasn't easy. As I struggled to get free, everything went black and then I saw the light at the end of the tunnel. In that moment, I was certain that this was the end for me. I somehow managed to get a better hold of the person's head and yank them off me. We ran to the car and got away. A week or so later, my wife had been talking to everyone she thinks might know what happened. Turns out her ex had paid 2 people $50 to do me in that night. I was doing volunteer work in Central America, working in a real bad area of the capital city. It was a slum built on top of the city's garbage dump. The whole place reeked of trash, and there were large metal cylinders coming up out of the ground throughout the area to vent the gas from decomposing garbage underground. As a fellow volunteer and I walked down a dirt path, 2 men approached us. I'd never seen them before. They were acting strangely, but I just thought they were drunk or on something. A lot of people in the area drank rubbing alcohol to get drunk since it was cheaper than beer or liquor. Over time, drinking the rubbing alcohol would really mess with their brains. As the men got closer, they began acting really friendly. Too friendly. One of them came close to me, trying to put his arm around my shoulders. At first, it seemed like the behavior of a guy who gets happy and friendly when he's drunk. However, an alarm went off in my head and I gently but firmly pushed him away. I tried to make it seem lighthearted and playful, like, "Hey man, how's it going?" affectionate shove. I didn't want to make a scene, since I was a gringo. I didn't want to seem like an ugly American. This went on over and over down the whole path. He'd get close, I'd shove him off, he'd come close again. Finally, my friend and I came to a fork in the path and we went one way while they went the other. After we got to the house of some people we knew, we told them about the 2 guys. I was so focused on protecting myself, I didn't even notice much of what was happening with the other guy. My hosts said, "Oh, everyone around here knows him. That's his routine. He comes up to people, pretends to be friendly, puts his arm around them, and then he pulls out the knife and shanks them in the stomach." I was that close to getting a knife in the gut. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.